Good morning. It is Tuesday, September 10, 2019, and welcome to the Lane County Board of Commissioners meetings. We'll have 2 days of meetings this week, and I'll go over the adjustments to the agenda. So Commissioner Burney will be excused this morning. During sometime during the morning, he needs to go to Springfield to help celebrate the opening of the Wayfair installation in Springfield. So, Commissioner, thank you for doing that. And when you leave, particularly if I'm talking, it won't be a reflection on what I'm saying at the moment that I'm talking, or anyone else for that matter. So thank you for doing that. Item 5A2 on our consent calendar, the matter of declaring a homeless emergency, that will be pulled for separate discussion and vote at the request of Commissioners Bozovich and Farr. I want to also make sure that the board knows and the public knows that at 10 a.m. we're having a time certain for the discussion of the Oregon State Extension Service, and the folks from the Extension Service will be here at 10 a.m. At 3 p.m., the board is having an executive session in the board conference room, and that is set up because of other people that are coming to that executive session. So if we finish our afternoon that starts at 1:30, a little earlier than that, then we will be in recess. But it looks like we're going to have plenty of things between 1:30 and 3 before our executive session. And one other announcement, adjustments to our agenda is that tomorrow at 9 a.m. the board is having a retreat at 400 International Way, Unit 150 in Springfield, Oregon, and that should be going from about 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, so any other adjustments to the agenda that commissioners want to bring to my attention? And Mr. Mokrzycki?
No.
Okay. And number 2, do we have any emergency business?
No.
Very good. So at this time, we'll move to our public comment. And I'll be taking folks that have signed up for public comment in the order in which they've signed up. And when I call your name, come up to the microphone. Cynthia Matherly, Jim Flynn, Ralph McDonald. Oh, and if you're a second or third, just stay or go to the front row. So Cynthia Matherly, Jim Flynn, Ralph McDonald, Karen Kaplan, Dorothy Atneve, Dave Piccioni, Webb Sussman, and Michael Gannon. And so when I call your name, you'll be given 3 minutes. Our Vice Chair, Commissioner Buck, will be turning the timer on when you say your name and where you live, and then you'll be given 3 minutes. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this public meeting today. My name is Cynthia Matherly. I'm a master cycler. I live in beautiful Lane County. I'd like to talk about polystyrene foam, or called by its trade name, styrofoam, and how toxic it really is. Foods and beverages in polystyrene cups and containers are more likely to leach substances, especially hot drinks, or anything that's reheated, like a leftover. Oily foods like French fries, burgers, pizzas, salad dressings, so forth. Anything that contains acid, tomato, citrus, alcohol, beer, or wine. These, along with being a possible carcinogen, styrene is also a neurotoxin. It accumulates in fatty tissues. The adverse health effects associated with exposure to styrene include fatigue, ability to concentrate, reduced ability to concentrate, increase in abnormal pulmonary function, disrupted hormone function, including thyroid, headache, irritation of the eyes and nose. Tens of thousands of workers are exposed to styrene, and chronic exposure is associated with impaired hearing, depression, as well as adverse effects on kidney function. One study reported excess numbers of deaths associated with lung cancer, with ovarian cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease among such workers. Styrofoam lasts almost forever. It takes almost 500, maybe approximately 500 years to decompose in the environment. Since the vast majority is not recycled, some landfills are harboring a significant amount of polystyrene by volume, as much as 25%. This polystyrene and polystyrofoam contributes to air pollution and climate change. If polystyrene is burned or incinerated, it releases toxic carbon monoxide into the air. So if you burn trash or if you have a fireplace, never burn it. The manufacturing process for polystyrene film also releases harmful hydrocarbons, which combine with nitrogen oxides in the presence of sunlight and form a dangerous air pollutant at ground level called tropospheric ozone, which is associated with health effects such as wheezing, shortness of breath, nausea, asthma, and bronchitis. Styrofoam is an environmental hazard from start to finish. It harms wildlife as it makes its way into the environment, especially waterways. It's consumed by land and marine animals, causing blockage of their digestive system, choking, and death. Microscopic pieces are digested by marine life, and so this toxic polystyrene may enter the human food chain. Toxic polystyrene, styrofoam, or as we call it by its brand name Styrofoam, should have already been banned worldwide. I ask one of the commissioners today to make an agenda team request for a work session on food-related styrofoam. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And next up, Jim Flynn, followed by Ralph McDonald, followed by Karen Kaplan. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jim Flynn. I've lived in Lane County for 30 years and want to start by thanking you for being county commissioners. Styrofoam bans are sweeping across the nation. Styrofoam is not biodegradable. It might break into small pieces, even minuscule pieces, but the smaller it gets, the harder it is to clean up. Styrofoam can't be recycled. Some places like St. Vincent de Paul's collect styrofoam, but that's mainly block styrofoam. Most community recycling centers, including Lane County, don't accept food-related styrofoam. Here's a small partial list of counties and states and cities that have completely or partially banned styrofoam. New York City, other cities in New York, including counties, Albany, Nassau, Suffolk County, Washington, D.C., six cities in Florida, Miami-Dade County in Florida, 8 cities in Massachusetts, Minneapolis, Seattle, Issaquah County, and San Juan County in Washington, about 50 cities in California, including Oakland, San Jose, Santa Cruz, Monterey, San Francisco, also a whole slew of California counties, Ventura, Sonoma, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, San Mateo, Orange County, Marin, and LA County. And in Oregon and Portland, and Florence have adopted ordinances. The states of Maine and Maryland have adopted anti-styrofoam ordinances. Does Lane County want to be behind Orange County and New York City? Some of these places have banned the use of styrofoam by all stores, restaurants, parks, and beaches. Others target food and beverage containers specifically. Some include eating utensils, and others target plastic materials as well. I am here to ask that the Commission take a leadership role and use its county health authority to ban food-related styrofoam in Lane County and set an example for the rest of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Ralph McDonald, Karen Kaplan, Dorothy Atnev, Dave Piccioni. Welcome, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and want to thank you for your work on environmental and many other issues addressing our county. I'm Ralph McDonald. I'm Sustainability Commissioner representing South Eugene in Eugene. I'm speaking today as an individual, although I did chair during the last year a sustainability committee looking at food waste and food packaging. In April, the Oregon legislature under House Bill 2883 voted against using food service styrofoam statewide. This was defeated or at least not passed in July 9th of this year. chemical industry, lobbyists, Agrilex testified that they can depolymerize polystyrene foam into a monomer oil, thus it's recyclable. We don't dispute that. We think styrofoam can be recycled, and we're pleased to see efforts to recycle block styrofoam. But this is a separate issue and separate problem. Styrofoam in food service, less than 9% of it makes it into either the landfill or recycling. So it's where it ends up is on the beaches. We were over at south of Honeyman State Park and hiked into my family here and I a couple years ago, one of our favorite lakes. There was styrofoam floating in the lake and at the little sand shore. It wasn't exactly the beach. It was a beach in from the lake. This was still Lane County. And the labeling, the logos showed that it wasn't a Florence. Florence has banned styrofoam, but it wasn't a Florence outlet of a chain that had provided the styrofoam that got over there. So it's an issue for the streams and roadsides of Lane County and for the county cost to clean up in terms of litter. We're looking at to-go containers, bowls, cups, trays, and we would like, as a previous speaker stated, we would like to see today an agenda team request by the commission. We've met with Dan Hurley and Sarah Grimm, the county staff people. They're very supportive. They take direction from the commission, and the commission has Home Rule Health Authority under Section 18(1)(c) to administer health and sanitation in the county. Home rule is very important. If you don't use home rule, you lose it. And the legislature, yes, the legislature may do something in the short session, but the surest way to ensure that is to have steps toward counties and municipalities around the state moving on their own. I think that would help ensure that the state legislature does take this issue seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karen Kaplan, followed by Dorothy Atnev, followed by Dave Piccioni.
Hi, I'm Karen Kaplan. I'm in Pete Sorensen's district. Thank you very much for allowing for public comment and also for your work in supporting our county and making it a really great place to live. So I'm here also to support a ban and on EPS, which is expanded polystyrene. This is food service grade type of styrofoam that we see around in our food consumption. I think it's time for Lane County to get on board with these bans. As Jim read off, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of towns, counties, and states that have banned this. And so it's not just cities that are going after this. The state of Maine and the state of Maryland have both fully banned EPS in all food service locations. And I was very impressed and surprised to see an extensive list of counties around the country that have also taken action on banning this as well. I want to also say that besides Portland, that the University of Oregon also banned polystyrene in 1988, and you've never heard a squeak of people freaking out because there's not an alternative for styrofoam, and they'd like to keep their styrofoam cups and to-go containers. Besides health issues that are already mentioned, we talked about there is a problem with it with recycling, because even though Ralph mentioned that it could be collected and taken to Agilex and turned back into oil, that's a pyrolysis process and is not recycling, and it's extremely dirty and creates toxins as a byproduct as well. It also fills up our precious landfill, which I know you've worked really hard to create a really good solid waste management plan to conserve that land and also be able to manage our waste here in Lane County, which the solid waste management plan also includes action on waste reduction initiatives as well. And so I'm really thankful for those efforts that you've already supported. As Ralph mentioned, we see styrofoam as a bane in our ocean. You go out walking on the beach, you see these styrofoam to-go containers everywhere, and they also fill up our local waterways. I've been working with the city of Berkeley and following what they've been doing, and one of the most stark things that I've heard from them is that they did a study on stormwater cleanup And they found that 67% of the stuff that was ending up in the stormwater and on the streets was from single-use disposables. And with that, they had to increase their tax base over $1 million a year just to maintain the cleanup of those items. So not only does it affect public health, it affects his taxes, it affects the quality of Lane County as well. Also, you know, this would be seemingly a fairly easy thing to do, because if you look around, a lot of food retail operations have already eliminated styrofoam and are using other alternatives. One thing that would be really great is if this was potentially paired with
Thanks so much for your public comment.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dorothy Atneve, Dave Piccioni, Webb Sussman, Michael Gannon. So welcome, Ms. Atneve.
Good morning. I'm Dorothy Atneve. I live in Eugene, and I have property on Collard Lake Way. And I'm here to say thank you to the commission, especially Commissioner Bozovich, but to all of you, and to the public works people, the engineers and construction folks who've been doing a great job on our emergency repair. We really appreciate it. I'm speaking for other neighborhood people who are here, and I think also for some who weren't able to be here, but who are following this issue. And also thanks to the public works and surveyors who've prepared a really great report, and to all of you for getting our road off of the junk heap of history and giving it a little study. So we just wanted to express our appreciation this morning and say thanks.
Thank you very much. Dave Piccioni, Webb Sussman, Michael Gannon, welcome.
Good morning. My name's Dave Piccioni, and I agree with everything that was said, but a lot has been left out. Styrofoam is indeed a problem. It's part of a carbon chain compound that are very resilient, and they form what are the bonds called? Well, anyway, they form these really tight bonds that keep the styrofoam together. But nothing was said about plastic or any other component of that kind that can be. So, like, we don't want styrofoam, but what are we going to do? What are we going to replace it with? It seems when I present a problem, I like to have a solution also to recommend. Unfortunately, I don't know a solution of how to replace plastics or styrofoams or anything. I went to an Indian restaurant and they put my food in a paper container, and it was hot food and it had liquid and it all fell down on the ground. So. Yes, styrofoam is a problem. You go to the ocean and you see a lot of dead birds with all these different synthetic compounds in their body, which they were not able to digest or even survive. As a child, I had this idea that it would be really good to have this machine where you could throw in all the garbage and it'll separate it all at the atomic level. So you'd have carbon here, fluorine here, chlorine here, hydrogen here, and then maybe you can rearrange it in a way that's more sustainable. Oh yeah, the type of bonds that these carbon containing molecules is called tetrahedral. It's very tough bonds to break by nature. So I just hope that when people go shopping, they take a bag, and that way they don't have to get a bag from the store. You just put, if you think you're going to be buying more than 3 things, you can put it in your canvas bag and walk to your car or to your home or wherever. I think that's an initial step, and the only one I'm able to suggest, because I don't know how to replace styrofoam. So thank you very much for listening to this talk.
Thank you. Webb Sussman, followed by Michael Gannon. Welcome, Mr. Sussman.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen, other commissioners, Administrator Bozovich. Sorry, I apologize. Maura Husky. Thank you all very much for your time this morning. As several of you know, I recently returned from visiting family back east in New England, and I've got many observations from that visit that I think would be useful to the Commission. However, this morning I'd like to focus on the notion of an annual report. These reports are put together by a combination of staff and volunteer citizens. They're put together, as the title implies, annually. They reflect not only the financial state of the city or town the report is for, or the county, but they also reflect the operational issues that have come up over the past year, and they also reflect where the organization would like to move and direct its resources going forward. I brought a sample with me this morning, and we'll share it with the administrator. I'm hoping he will also share it with you. The report provides a degree of clarity into how the organization is operating and what it's doing with its money. I think that by producing a similar type of report for the county might have avoided the problem it had with the recent jail election, among other things. And I think the county would also meet the demand that some citizens have been making for several years now for increased clarity in the county's operations and in the county's financial. It's much easier to read than the CAFA that the county currently produces for the state of Oregon, and it also is much more, well, better marketing, if you'll pardon the expression. I'm going to go ahead and leave this with the administrator. I thank you very much for your time this morning, and I hope this change of pace has been a welcome one.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Gannon, please come forward. And is there anyone that hasn't been called on that wishes to make public comment? Okay, welcome, Mr. Gannon.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen, and thank you all for your public service. I wanted to try to talk about some things going on in our community that are really going on in the country, and suggest that there might be more perhaps inclusive or improvisational approaches that the commissioners could use that would result in a faster return on your efforts. Briefly, I wanted to, I could use my example of serving on the County Recycling Advisory Commission in the 90s when it was a constant concern about plastics. And I would suggest that Mr. Nussbaum's concern about the way we report our government activities would be essential here, because if you could identify the amount of money that the county spends at the landfill storing those plastics that we're discussing, in addition to the cost to the community, I think you could start to see a lot of changes that are really urgent. And I don't believe we have that information. I also want to talk about the, I know you put it off from today, but the emergency on homelessness. There is a tremendous emergency on homelessness, and it really needs to be addressed. But I believe one of the issues or analysis that needs to proceed is to look at homelessness, the parts of homelessness. There are a number of people who don't have appropriate mental health support. There are plenty of people who have disabilities, physical disabilities, and they don't have support. And there is a drug problem, a tremendous drug problem. I learned this morning at breakfast in the Mission that a dear young person that many of people in the Mission were looking out for committed suicide yesterday. And we know that the range of hard drugs that are available to very young people who get mixed up in this stew on the streets is overwhelming, and we're not really addressing it, and we're not publicly challenging it. One final comment would be to go back to the styrofoam and look at that cost that you might develop for that. You might discover that you could be proactive and set aside some money.
Thanks so much for your public comment.
That money could go to local scientific research to try to understand how we could produce products that will replace those plastics.
Okay, is there anyone, thank you for your public comment. Is there anyone else that has not signed up for public comment? Okay, thank you so much. We'll move now to item 4, which is our commissioner responses to public comment. Are there any commissioners that want to present any commissioner response? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, everybody, for coming this morning. I appreciate your time. I thought I'd just chat about styrofoam for a minute or two, since that was a dominant subject this morning. I, too, was following HB 2883 and was disappointed in the last session that that didn't get through. But I do foresee that coming back to the session, if not the short session, following the following long session. I also don't like to see styrofoam as, you know, the containers for takeout food, et cetera. It has a lot of environmental hazards. When it comes to the county, and I did note that there were other people that were talking about how other counties have banned it. When I think about it, you know, a lot of the restaurants are within the city limits, so it may not be as effective on a countywide basis as it would be, say, for like the city of Eugene, the city of Springfield. And you probably see a lot more a lot more change come faster if it was there. Not that we shouldn't have a discussion about that, because I'm very interested in product stewardship, and this is a product that I don't think manufacturers have taken responsibility for at the end of its lifespan. In addition to that, there are some challenges I foresee, because whenever you change from one to the other, you do have to be cautious of what the alternative will be. What will people think of as an alternative container? And you can think of that as the problem we're now seeing with compostable serviceware. That has its own issues. So I think it's part of a larger discussion, really, than just that one particular product. But when you're talking about products that have environmental hazards associated with them in general, what do you do about that particular issue of banning those materials and the complexity of which there are examples such as the other serviceware and how you can move through that? So I think it's a larger discussion, personally. And I do look forward to seeing what the session may bring of this particular issue, but I really feel strongly that we need to be thinking about it or examining the issue at a higher level even than that one product. So if we do decide to do a work session on that, and I would be interested in doing that, but it would be more on a level of what does the board want to talk about when it comes to product or material banning and the complexities associated really around that. And would they be effective, and how would they be effective? So I just wanted to touch on that. I know that Commissioner Bozovich will be talking more about Collard Lake Road, I'm sure. But I'm glad to see that the residents there are so thankful for what's happening. I would love to be able to extend that to the folks that are actually on the ground working on that road, make sure that they know that all those residents are really appreciative of the hard work that they're doing. And that's all I have for this morning.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any remonstrance? Commissioner Bozovich?
Thank you. And I didn't pull the item on the consent calendar on Collard Lake Road for separate discussion, so I'll just take a moment to mention it now. We're going to, under our consent calendar, which are supposedly routine items, do something that's pretty not routine in accepting a road for county maintenance that was originally intended and to be accepted back in 1976 by a previous board. So we're kind of fixing something, many years later that was intended. And I'm really appreciative of the board's support in doing that. It's a road that stands out. It's like the nail that sticks up gets hit by the hammer, but that road was definitely sticking up higher than all the rest of the nails. It's one of the longest local access roads we have. It accesses the most parcels as a single entry of any local access road we have, just about. So it just really sticks out as something that should have been publicly maintained. And it speaks to something, we've had some discussions here about maybe our subdivision standards and partitioning standards need to address access issues a little bit better around not getting too many lots on a dead-end road, and also how long those roads are and whether they should be local access roads or public roads. And that's a subdivision standard discussion we need to have separately. But I am really thankful that I've heard from the folks by email and other sources that they're really pleased with the work our crews do. Our guys in Public Works are amazing. I believe we have a tentative agreement with our Public Works union. So that's even, they're just great guys to work with all around, as both, labor management side, the quality of work they do is amazing. And I'm really happy that the folks down in Collard Lake Road are noticing the good work they do. You get a chance, stop and say hi to them. Tell them you think they're doing a good job directly. They would love to hear that. Because, it's not that busy of a road that you couldn't pull off and say hello. So thank you, everybody, for coming in about that.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just very briefly on Collard Lake Road, I'd like to thank you for driving over the hill, finding a reason to drive through the construction and weather over the hill today. And just point out that Commissioner Bozovich had a few words to say about the process, but really it was an extensive process that Commissioner Bozovich, bootstrapped. That is to say, he dragged it along and made it happen. He put a great deal of energy into it, visited the Collard Lake Road, and really has been the one who has driven the process in getting the action that will take place today. I hope your trip home is pleasant, understanding that with action that we're taking today, you can rely on fire trucks accessing your property, or rely on being able to get out of there when you need to get out of there. So thank you for being here, and thanks to Commissioner Bozovich for driving the process. Mr. Gannon, I see you quite often. You are, the words you say are always well thought through, well reasoned, and have a message that should be listened to. Thank you for your work attending Poverty and Homelessness Board meetings, attending the meetings of the subcommittee on supportive housing and shelter development, and for your ongoing work. You always have a venue in those committees, and I'm glad to see that you're here talking to us as a Board of Commissioners. Thanks again, Mr. Gannon. You are well stated, and I listen to every single word you say. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Bernie.
Regarding Collard Lake Road, as much as I despise giving Commissioner Bozovich credit for anything, I'm just kidding. He educated me not only on Collard Lake Road, but on the county road system. Drive home safely. It's raining out there. As it relates to, I just want to thank everyone for their time in coming, as Commissioner Buck did. And so my remarks are going to be so brief. As it relates to the styrofoam issue, or plastics, or certain types of pesticides, or on and on and on and on. I want to reiterate, this county is now committed to move forward with a Lane County Climate Action Plan, and to the degree we have work sessions on specific, I know you've hammered me and I know you're going to educate me, but to the degree we've had work sessions on specific issues, it does sometimes cloud our focus. And I think that we need to be focused on all the ramifications, and I assure you we are staffing up to do that and to be inclusive, and this will be part of that process. And I, for one, will Google and learn about how other counties have in fact implemented what you were discussing. And as it relates to the gentleman that discussed an annual report for marketing and other purposes, I don't know if that's the secret way to do it, but I am all for engaging and providing information in manageable ways to the general public. I have learned that many people don't know what the county does, and the county does so much, and it would be very good to be transparent and engage people in that. So I thank you all for coming. That's really all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just take a moment to make a few comments. First of all, as always, thank you for coming to the public comment and using this right that you have to come in and give the government some encouragement, some peace of your mind, some criticism, whatever is on your mind. Appreciate the participation. First and foremost, Mr. Sussman, thanks so much for your presentation. I did take a moment to look up what the dominant characteristic of the Boston accent is, and it is the R-colored vowel, which we heard about barns, cars, and parks, all of which I think you mentioned. Anyway, so thank you on the substance. Thanks so much for your bringing that report, and we'll certainly take a look at it. And I'm sure Mr. Mokreisky will send it around on what we call our route mail, so we'll get a chance to see that. On the Collard Lake Road, I must say this has been going on for so many years that I've been here, over 20 years, that I'm really glad we finally, are wrapping it up today. We did actually consider it to be non-controversial and routine in the sense that we'd already hammered it quite a few times in public session, so congratulations. And I'm glad to hear also the men and women of Local 626 are doing such a great job out there in doing the work, so thank you for bringing that to our attention, because we don't always know these things, especially in a county as big as we have, so thanks for coming in. I'll mention, too, that on the topic of suicide, substance abuse, homelessness, we are underway on a variety of those topics, and whatever we're doing obviously is not going to stop a suicide that just took place. I'm really sorry to hear about this, and I think that our homelessness effort and our housing efforts, as well as our what we'll be discussing later today about substance abuse, all relevant to these topics. And then on this food styrofoam ban idea, I kind of see it as communities, whether they're small like Florence or large like New York City or Washington, D.C., they're doing something that I think the casual observer of all this would say is a pretty straightforward thing, to ban the styrofoam that's used in the sort of fast food industry. And I was in Florence a couple of weeks ago in the summer, and I was really happy to see that. I got some food in Florence, and it doesn't come with styrofoam in Florence. I view it as a component of a win along the way in our sustainability efforts. I don't view it as something we have to wait until we have the Bible, the Quran, the holy book of sustainability, ready to be printed and distributed, and we can't do something until we get there. My view is that it is a win along the way, and I'd be in favor of doing a work session on, and very narrowly on, the food styrofoam container ban. So thanks for coming in and bringing in some statistics and some information on that. And we'll take that up later in their meeting under agenda team or work session requests. So, okay, thank you very much for your public comment. We'll now move on to our consent calendar, and we're pulling item 5A2, which is the matter of declaring a homelessness emergency. But other than 5A2, we have the consent calendar ready for a motion. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of 5A2.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Bernie to approve the consent calendar as printed in our published agenda, with the exception of our 5A2 item. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. And the motion carries, and all orders are adopted, including our Collard Lake Road order. So thank you, commissioners, and so it's adopted by a vote of 5-0 on all orders. Now we'll take up item 5A2, and this is order and resolution 19-09-10-01 in the matter of declaring a homeless emergency. And Commissioner Bozovich and Commissioner Farr, would you like to make some comments on this?
Sure, I'll begin, I guess. First, I wasn't sure we'd gotten 3 head nods for this. My recollection of the discussion was that we needed to talk about looking at our code first so that declaring an emergency actually had impact. But I realized after getting a bookmark from Diana of the tape that we actually got a 3rd head nod. So that was my first reason for asking to have it pulled. But when it gets right down to it, the staff report and the resolution conflict with each other. You read in the staff report under item A, on June 11th, 2019, the board requested staff research homeless emergency declarations, goes on to say, basically, there's nothing in Lane County that has relevant code language, and any such declaration would be symbolic, not waive any laws or provide any access to any additional resources. Then the actual resolution has a whereas in it that basically says that by doing so, there's value, in passing this resolution. We have a staff report that basically says there's no value other than symbolic, and then we have a resolution saying that there's value. It's in direct conflict with each other. This is just another example, and I'm hoping that tomorrow's board retreat, when we work on our strategic plan, where we're wandering off of our strategic plan, how much staff time was spent developing this. About 8 years ago, when I first became a board member, I stopped our board from doing resolutions of this kind. They cost a minimum of $800. I figured out how much time it would take just to place an item on a board agenda, let alone then if you start getting into staff going back and forth and writing one, it gets closer to $2,000 or $3,000. So we're going to, if we continue down this path, and I hear we've been asked to do an addiction, declaration. We're being asked to do all these various declarations. I think something around hate and white supremacy is the other one that's coming up. We continue to spend resources that could be put towards providing critical services. So, I'm pulling this basically, one, to make a statement around we shouldn't be doing meaningless resolutions. we're costing staff time and money. And two, this resolution actually is in conflict with the staff report. So I'm going to be voting no on this resolution based on those things, and I'm hoping the board will have discipline in telling people we're not just going to do resolutions to do resolutions, that we want to spend our staff's time and our valuable resources on providing critical services, not signaling our virtues that we support this or we're going to declare a meaningless emergency here or there. We're doing lots of work on homelessness. We need to continue that work on the TAC report. You know, there are other efforts we're working on. You know, we talked about mental health today. Mr. Gannon testified to us. We need to finish our work on a crisis center. You know, we're working in the PSCC on developing our application towards the Impact Act that passed this last session, which is basically the mental health version of Justice Reinvestment Grant. That work needs to move forward. We don't need to be spending our time writing resolutions that have no force of law, don't change any resources, don't create any actions. They just signal that we're virtuous and we believe in this cause or don't believe in that cause. And I think it's a waste of our staff's time and money, and I'm hoping after our discussion on the strategic plan, we get focused on, you know, whatever it is we get focused on, and we stop running around and chasing after whatever we hear public comment on, because we have to protect the public's resources. It's our job to do so.
Okay, other comments? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for indulging me in pulling this item. I wasn't alone in pulling it. I have a little bit of a different take. When Commissioner Sorensen several weeks ago suggested that placing this item on the consent calendar, he asked for head nods, which is our normal routine, and I did acquiesce to placing this on the consent calendar. But if you listen to the text of or you hear the words, he also said you can pull it from the consent calendar if need be. Well, that's what I did. I pulled it from the consent calendar because a resolution is only symbolic if you allow it to be only symbolic. And if you look at this resolution, you'll see words in there that say, whereas the Board of Commissioners desires to declare a homelessness emergency as a symbolic gesture. That's actually in the resolution. And but I'm going to back that up a little bit, because while the resolution itself is symbolic, the actions that we take subsequent to and the actions that we have taken prior to the resolution are not symbolic. They are actual actions. By placing the words before the public, Lane County, and more importantly, the people who watch us understand that this is a priority for us, and that the whereases in here are all well-founded and all make statements that support things that we are already doing. It's important to understand we can form and continue action while keeping an eye on the words that are contained in this resolution. Now, that being said, if you simply read the resolution, it looks symbolic. But if you take it in conjunction with the things that Lane County is doing as a part of our strategic plan, declared strategic plan, and the tactics embedded in the plan, we are taking action, continue to take action, and continue to look to the future for further action that we will need to take. Now, I'm going to look around the room a little bit right now. We in this room are all vulnerable to the same things. What's the first thing we're vulnerable to? Abraham Lincoln faced it. John F. Kennedy faced it. Adolf Hitler faced it. We do have that vulnerability. Every single person has that. And the vulnerability of death. We have a short life. But we also have vulnerabilities that are associated with living, and that is anxiety, is depression, is fear, is predation. We're vulnerable to different things in life. We're vulnerable to not getting the right medications. We're vulnerable to not getting a good night's sleep, so we cannot perform our duties the next day, whatever our duties may be, to 100% of our capacity. We, most of us sitting in this room, don't experience the deep edge of that vulnerability because we do have a safe place to sleep. We have a place to prepare our food. We have a place to stabilize our medication. We have a place to call home, a place to gather friends and feel safe and secure. The people that we're talking about in this resolution don't have that safety. Therefore, their vulnerability is amplified significantly. They're far more vulnerable to hunger. They're far more vulnerable to depression. They're far more vulnerable to the emergencies that afflict us all on a short-term basis in our regular lives. Think about this emergency. You ever had to go to the bathroom really bad and there isn't a toilet? You ever had that? Everybody has. Now, what kind of an emergency is that? When that is happening to you, there's no other emergency on earth that counts. So the very things that we're talking about in this resolution are the things that really we all should fully understand. This resolution and order can help us to further understand them, further try to understand them, and further try to help more people understand in a way that we can provide adequate response to the emergency which is contained in homelessness. Now, vulnerability is magnified. It's going to be a reminder to the Board of Commissioners that, and to adjacent jurisdictions and to staff, that we can do something, that we have been doing something, and we will continue to do something. I've got the resolution in my hand right here. I am going to personally carry a copy of it with me. It is symbolic. The resolution itself is symbolic and contains nothing more than symbolism other than the reminder that we have a call to action, that we can act, we have been acting, we should act, and we should profess our action at every opportunity we get, and this is such an opportunity. We have, over the course of the last, well, several years, but since 1995, when I first became involved with Mr. Rickoff and also with the Mr. Manella and the Human Services Commission, we have changed the trajectory of addressing homelessness. We have changed the trajectory. It was flat. We have a bit of a trajectory. We need to continue to change the trajectory, and that will force us into action in the future that doesn't necessarily cost a great deal of money, that doesn't necessarily cost a great deal of resource and even time and attention, but it does help us to focus on the things that absolutely mean the most to the people, the men, women, and the children who are living around us. I've been in correspondence with a woman just recently who talked about what's been alarming to me over the past 5 to 10 years is the growing number of 4 specific population groups on the streets: youth, LGBTQ people, seniors and elderly, and people with serious chronic health conditions, including behavioral health conditions. I agree with her completely. We can focus on different groups. We can make a difference. We can change the trajectory of our response to homelessness. And this, while symbolic, yep, it's symbolic, absolutely, and it's stated in the resolution itself that it's symbolic, can be a call to action, and not just for we who are voting on it today, but for the people who see this today and into the future. We have 10 steps, and I plan to take time to read them, but I'm not going to burden everybody with the 10 steps, the 10 work areas that we're addressing, but I'll add a couple. Expand and better coordinate outreach to homeless people. Expand diversion and rapid exit services through homeless services. Create additional permanent supportive housing. Implement effective move-on strategies. Expand and increase utilization of tenancy supports. There are many things that we are doing that we can do, and this resolution simply helps us to highlight it, place it on the pedestal, and take one more opportunity to let people know how important it is not only to us, but to every single person who lives in our community and lives around us and experiences the vulnerabilities that we all experience. Now, I would personally like to change the resolution, but I'm not going to do it because I want to pass the resolution today. But where I would change it is I would add, the second whereas says, whereas Lane County continues to invest in addressing housing and homeless challenges in our community, we continue to address conditions addressing housing and homelessness in our community. I would like to change that. My preference would be, whereas the Lane County Board of Commissioners, through its multi-jurisdictional poverty and homelessness board and its intergovernmental Human Services Commission and other work groups, will continue to identify means and ways to end homelessness. That would be my preference, but I'm not going to change it because I'd like to vote on this today. I'd like to place this on a pedestal, and notice I'm folding this copy right here. This copy right here is going to go into my pocket so that I don't forget the fact that we do have an emergency and that we can do something about it.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the order and resolution?
I'll move approval of the resolution. And you don't want it as amended?
If we can vote on it today as amended, my amendment, Madam Vice Chair, would simply state that to replace the third bullet point with, whereas the Lane County Board of Commissioners, through its multi-jurisdictional poverty and homelessness boards and its Intergovernmental Human Service Commission and other work groups, will continue to identify means and ways to end homelessness. And I'll provide that text exactly verbatim.
Thank you, sir.
So I'd propose that amendment.
I would accept that amendment. If there's a second.
Okay, so Commissioner Buck's motion is to approve the order and resolution as presented with the substitution of language that Commissioner Farr provided. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Burney. And I'll first call on Commissioner Buck and then Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr, for your passionate words about this particular subject. I feel in the same way as you do. I take exception on this particular subject to the quote of a meaningless emergency. I strongly feel that homelessness and housing is the greatest issue of our time that we are currently facing. I hear it from constituents every single day. I hear it from electeds from every level, all the way from locally to nationally. Through decades of disinvestment from our federal government, we are seeing this on the ground in our communities every day. We see where we would traditionally see folks on the street in downtown or low-income neighborhoods now all over our community, in every income level, throughout the county, in rural locations, in between rural locations and metro, on the roads, camping in our forests. We have a huge emergency on the table. If this was a resolution that was not connected with the top item on our strategic plan or anywhere on our strategic plan, I may take issue such as what Commissioner Bozovich is talking about of doing a resolution that's not in our target area. But this is one of our highest target areas on our strategic plan that we are now working very diligently to resolve, or at least make a dent in at the very least. It is not something that we locally can solve. It is something that we need to do on every level of our society. What would be great is to have a strong, robust federal interest in housing again. But we know that that may not be on our way. To have a resolution today about the importance of our dedication on this board towards this subject that is on our strategic plan, I think is not just symbolic, even if it does say that, and even if it doesn't necessarily tap into additional resources financially that we have at this time. Doesn't mean it won't in the future. And it also holds us as the board to task about what we should be doing in the direction of this county. So I'm in very much support of this particular resolution, and I do want to see us follow through on what it says and where we are continuing to go in the next few years.
Hey, Commissioner Burney.
I got to go. No, sorry, but first I'll weigh in. Well, this is really interesting. First, I don't know if any of you know this or care, but now and then I find myself wiping a tear from my eye when something really touches me, and I try and do it privately so nobody knows. And this is the first time, Commissioner Farr, that you have been the cause of such wiping a tear from the eye.
Ain't over yet.
I believe that. I'm going to vote yes on this, but I'm going to echo some very legitimate concerns that I think Commissioner Bozovich mentions, and I agree with him. Here we have I'm voting yes on this resolution, but here we have an analysis, and it says there's no changes in current county policies. Well, either we're not doing enough or there should be changes as it relates to focus on solving homelessness. And I would, as asterisk say that I've been amazed at the degree to which there is county focus as it relates to housing access, housing affordability, and those who are condemned to be homeless at this point of time due to an economy and a lack of passion that's beyond our control. Here. It also states that there's no specific financial or resource considerations, which, if we're going to have a resolution, there kind of ought to be, I would think, as one commissioner. And it also, and I think this is part of what you were mentioning in terms of symbolism, it also states that the entire impact is to raise awareness of the issue, et cetera. So my disappointment is this won't change, at this point in time at least, the operations of the county. I think municipalities and counties and private corporations, one of which I'm about to visit, and community groups and nonprofits all really need to focus on the mechanics of changing this situation and how that relates to the expenditures of dollars in fiscally efficient ways. But nonetheless, I am moved and swayed, and I will vote yes on this resolution as amended.
Okay, are there any further comments on the motion as presented? Commissioner Bozievich.
I'll try and be brief because of our 10 o'clock. I'll just say that the fourth whereas clearly is in conflict with the staff report. The staff report, we've received research on the lack of value of adopting this resolution, not on the value of. And I would have make a motion to amend that, but I know it wouldn't get a second, and I know it won't pass, so I'm not going to bother. And I will also just quickly say the role of government in creating our homeless crisis is often ignored. Regulation and government interference destroyed Oregon's rural economy. Methamphetamine started in rural Oregon. It was the first drug epidemic to start rural and go urban. And we are the home of the meth epidemic. After we lost our timber industry and our rural economy here in Oregon, how much of our homelessness is driven by meth? How much of our cost of housing is driven by our land use laws, our rules on building permits over time? So please don't always blame Washington, D.C. for some of this. We should own some of this at home. And we should be careful of the actions we take as government, that they don't have the unintended consequences of driving up housing costs and limiting housing supply.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I saved this brief statement for this portion of the discussion. Annette Lorraine Montero died on the streets. Her death was tragic, and it was unnecessary. If she had had a place to sleep that night, she would still be alive and struggling with her vulnerabilities, which we've already identified. So if there's nothing else we can do, and I'm not going to suggest a work session on this, but if there's nothing else we can do, we can begin to keep track of who is dying, which homeless people are dying on our streets, how they die, and how can we take steps specifically on the ultimate emergency, the emergency that causes death. So Annette Lorraine Montero, remember that name. And one last thing I will say is that we do have a strategic plan. It's open in front of me right now. Item 1A on our strategic plan says affordable housing and homelessness. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if you can call the vote, I'll vote, but otherwise I'm out of here.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Vote is 4-1. The order is order and resolutions adopted. Okay, let's move to our next item, and our friends are here from Oregon State Extension Service. And so please come forward, those of you that are involved in this presentation, and you can drag some more chairs up if there's more need for chairs at the front row. Okay, I've seen some people saying no. So this is item 6A, our discussion, Oregon State Extension Service discussion on growth and programming since the 2016 option levy. Jillian Drews is the local liaison, and Ms. Drews, if you could introduce your colleague, that'd be great.
This is Patty Driscoll. She works in our office.
Great. And I was told that you were going to take about 20 minutes to make your presentation, so we're ready for you to do that.
Thank you. Good morning. As I just said, my name is Jillian Drews. I am a family and community health agent located in the OSU Extension office here in Lane County. I'm also the local liaison, so I'll be working with local stakeholders and local government over the next year. So you'll be seeing more of me, I think. OSU Extension has a long history in Lane County, over 100 years, and we're really proud to be offering a great variety of programs and services. And I feel especially lucky to get to be the person here today to give you an update, because we've seen really tremendous growth in the last 3 years since the passage of the 2016 tax measure, which the board was supportive of. So I'd like to give just a quick overview of OSU Extension, as I know they're new board members. OSU Extension is the off-campus branch of OSU. It was created through a series of acts of Congress around the turn of the 20th century that established the land-grant universities. The intention of these acts was really to extend knowledge into the communities, to a broader swath of the population than typically had access in those days. So early extension agents would travel the brand new railroads out west. They'd hold whistle-stop meetings talking about new agricultural innovations or issues of home economics. And though we've modernized in a lot of ways, our mission is still to provide Oregonians with research-based and very practical information to help them make more informed and better decisions for their lives. An OSU Extension, an office, a county office is really a reflection of that county's needs and interests and priorities. So these bullets are the programs that we offer here in Lane County, and different counties have different bullet points, different programs. So as you can see, we have a wide variety, a great diversity that really reflects the diversity of our county. And importantly, we really can't do this alone. Our success lies in our collaborative relationships that really span public and private sectors. And I'll be talking a lot about volunteers throughout this presentation, but it can't be said enough. We have, I think, about 340 active volunteers right now, and they're just some of the most dedicated and incredible people. They really allow us to do the work that the community needs and wants. And most of them probably started by coming to Extension to get a question answered or to learn more about a particular topic of interest to them. And then they decided to stick around and join us in our mission to really share that knowledge with their neighbors. So collaborative relationships are really key to what we do, and it's pretty much how we're able to do as much as we can. We have a small staff of about 12 educators. And as you can see, those 340 volunteers, in 2018, they contributed over 25,000 hours, basically doubling the amount of full-time staff that we have. So if OSU Extension is the bridge from the university, our volunteers are really the bridge out into all the different communities to their neighbors. And what I'd like to do for the rest of the presentation is to basically put these metrics from 2018, these numbers from 2018 into perspective and talk a little bit about where we've come from since the passage of the 2016 tax measure that provided us with more financial support. So I'm going to start with 4-H, the 4-H Youth Development Program. We organize and manage that out of OSU Extension. We have a really talented faculty member named Emily Anderson. As you can see from these photos, 4-H still has roots in its animal husbandry and livestock starts, but we also, this is a picture from a robotics team, and those kids on the right are from a junior master naturalist program. So we've really been able to expand into a lot of different areas, and our hope for that is to bring more kids into the fold, to allow more children to experience and explore different interests. As you probably know, the 4-H program was effectively shuttered in 2010 after the not favorable election results for extension. And so we've slowly been building back up. And after 2016, after the passage of that measure, we've really seen a big bump in our numbers. So you can see that we've been able to expand enrollment by 44%. And along with those youth often come parents. So those volunteer hours at the bottom are also up 42%. We've been able to lower our enrollment fees, which were higher because there wasn't a lot of money in the program, and that's improved the access to more youth. And we've also been able to add a couple more new community clubs. The chart on the right demonstrates fair participation, and FAIR is a real central part of a 4-H Kids year, a sort of a culminating program. And so as you can see, between 2014 and 2019, both exhibitors or participants tripled and their entries tripled. The tax levy also allowed us to hire an education program assistant for 4-H, a really talented educator named Emily, also named Emily. And she's been able to add a lot of new programs and really reach out into new parts of the community. So Junior Master Naturalist is one of those. It began as a grant-funded program. Was immediately incredibly popular. Every spot has filled up every time it's been offered. Kids who are involved with that basically get to explore the natural wonders of Oregon and travel regionally, and if they have the opportunity to get over 100 hours of STEM enrichment outside of school, which is really incredible. This program, as I mentioned, it was grant funded initially, and they weren't really sure how it was going to continue, but they found a home for it with the BEST after school program. So it's going to be self-sustaining from now on, which is great news. The Junior Master Gardener program is a really great example of a inter-extension collaboration. It's a, excuse me, it's a 4-H curriculum. Master Gardener volunteers from the Hort department are trained to teach it, and they actually go into the schools and are the instructors. And that took place, that just finished its full first school year. It was in 2 middle schools and 1 high school. Embryology has been very popular. There have been little chicken eggs hatching all over classrooms and libraries in Lane County, and I hear people are clamoring for more. So I think it's a relatively low input project that really gets some science out into the community and piques people's interest. And then finally, that last bullet are workshops that the 2 Emilys have been able to offer. Many workshops out to the community to try to recruit folks for volunteer or just let them know that 4-H exists. And then workshops that are specifically for the 4-H program. And I wanted to mention one 4-H program that was happening this summer around the office was being run by a young lady named Elizabeth. I met Elizabeth 5 years ago when I started. She was a new 4-Her. She had joined the Lane leadership team, which is the teen leaders. And she was very quiet and she was very shy, and I think maybe she joined mostly at the behest of her much more outgoing friend. I don't know for sure, but she really blossomed in 4-H. She ended up becoming a teen ambassador for the county. She graduated the program, went off to college to OSU, and she's been coming back in the summers and working as a student worker for the 4-H program. So she was around this summer running a summer camp, and I've heard that she's actually transferring to the U of O to get her master's or her teaching credential with the professional goal of being an extension agent. She'd like to either be a 4-H agent or a family and community health agent. So it's been really fun to see somebody really inspired by extension and blossoming in that program. So moving along, one of our goals as a unit was to reestablish the Forestry and Natural Resources program. So we were able to hire Lauren Grand, an extension forester, with state dollars from OSU, but we could only do that if we could demonstrate county support. So though she's not funded by the county tax levy, she couldn't be here if that tax levy hadn't passed. So we had to do one and then the other. And as you know, Lane County is a huge timber producer in the state, and so there's really no end of opportunity for her to be doing work here. She works with a lot of small family landowners and forest owners, as well as commercial timber companies. She has reestablished the Master Woodland Manager volunteer programs. Those are 35 new volunteers. She's helped reestablish the Women Owning Woodlands Network, and then she's just done lots and lots of teaching over the last few years. Pest detectors, that's training professionals, and then woodland management, wildfire education is something that is on a lot of homeowners' minds, not even necessarily woodland owners, but people who live up in the hills, for instance. So the work that Lauren does really helps small family woodland owners assess their needs and make good decisions for their property. The newest member of our faculty our program is Erica Cherno. She's a commercial and community horticulture faculty member. She'll be working with commercial nut growers, small fruit growers, really any commercial producer in our county to help support them. She also oversees the Master Gardener program, which is a very popular program in our county, basically working with mostly homeowners or folks who have questions around landscaping or gardening, disease, pest management, things of that nature. So those volunteers are real leaders in our unit specifically. They were very supportive during the 2016 campaign. And after that was passed successfully by 70%, our former director sat down with them and said, they had a conversation after and said, how can we thank the voters? How can we give them more? And what the volunteers came back with was an idea to extend the plant clinic. The plant clinic is located inside of our office, but was to create a mobile plant clinic. And so to actually take it out into the community, take it out to the smaller towns that where maybe people forget that the plant clinic and the Master Gardeners exist. And so since 2017, they've done 103 different events. They're often on the weekends. They often coincide with a farmer's market or some other kind of community event. And it's been really, really successful. So that was a direct result of the tax levy as a thank you to the voters. The Food Safety and Preservation Program has been around for a long time. It's probably, I think I can safely say it's the strongest in the state. It's probably one of the strongest in the nation. It's led by Nellie Ayler over there on the right. She built up a really incredible group of volunteers called the Master Food Preservers. And they teach workshops all over the county on food preservation, food safety, disaster preparedness. If you have an idea, they'll usually find a way to create a workshop or a class around it. They also, together with Douglas County, they run a hotline during peak months, so summer months, to answer people's questions about preservation usually. And frequently they receive calls from folks who are in the midst of doing something incredibly dangerous or who have just done something dangerous and are starting to wonder about it. And so these are really our volunteers who save lives. You know, people who've forgotten to put the lemon juice in the tomato sauce, and does it really matter? Or who didn't process the green beans long enough. And we all know the horrible stories of what can happen with food that hasn't been preserved properly. So the work these volunteers do is tremendous and very important. I'll also say on the hotline, they get a lot of local calls, some national calls, and even some international calls. So it's a resource for everybody. So the Food Safety and Preservation Program has benefited greatly from the addition of an office specialist who focuses on social media. I'm sorry. I take that back. They have benefited from that, but what they've benefited from is the addition of administrative support that came from the tax levy dollars. So there are 65 current MFP volunteers. 3 or 4 years ago, there were maybe 59 or 58, so not a huge difference. But because they no longer have to do the administrative work, the volunteers are able to be out in the community doing education. So 354% increase in educational contacts with the community, 200% increase in workshops, exhibits, and booths. That's really pretty incredible considering it's basically the same number of volunteers. And that's just because we have a county-funded administrative support person who can do the photocopies, do all the stuff that makes the programs run in the background. So the volunteers are where they belong, teaching out in the community. Melissa Ferry is our Small Farms faculty member. The Small Farms program is really about supporting local small farmers to be economically viable and environmentally sustainable. So she works with a lot of niche and specialty farmers to support whatever projects they have going on. Now, she works regionally among a handful of, she and her colleagues work regionally among the Valley counties. With the passage of the tax levy, we were able to recruit her to be housed in Lane County. And what that means for us, she still works regionally, but Lane County farmers have much quicker access to her. They could come into the office on a day when she's there and they could find her there and ask her questions. Or she could more easily go do a farm visit because she's not that far away. So that's made a really big difference. Here's some of the great work that she and her colleagues do around the Valley. So I run the nutrition education program. We are a preventative health program tasked with teaching the SNAP-eligible population about how to eat better on a budget. And we do this in a handful of ways. We have educators working in schools, and we have educators teaching adults in both English and Spanish, lots of cooking skills, shopping skills, food storage, that kind of information. And we also have a large volunteer program called the Food Pantry Project. We recruit and train volunteers to basically to work in the pantries all around the county. And what we're hoping they'll do is to be a resource for shoppers, to provide nutritional nudges. They always have a sample of a really healthy, tasty recipe. And those volunteers often love cooking and know a lot about cooking and can answer people's questions when there's like a huge pile of unlabeled greens and nobody quite knows what to do with it. Our volunteers can usually help folks with that. So we've had a lot of success with that program. It's the biggest in the state. And we benefited a lot from administrative support, specifically focusing on social media. We weren't doing a very good job of recruiting volunteers, but since the passage of the tax levy, we've pretty much doubled, I actually think we've tripled the number of recruits for our trainings. So we used to have pretty small 2 to 4 person trainings, and now we get about 20 people signing up and usually have 12 to 15 folks. So that's just more bodies, more volunteers who are out in the community doing that great work.
Is your presentation about to wrap up?
Oh, yes. Let's see, I can make it go even faster.
I didn't want to rush you, but I wanted to keep you within the 20 minutes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So here are the folks I've been talking about. These are the county-funded staff. They are the backbone for our programs. They do so much, and they allow volunteers and staff to do so much more. So we really appreciate them. As I mentioned, our social media strategy has really increased our presence on Facebook. We've reached almost 100,000 people. We frequently are told that folks have heard about our events from Facebook, so that's really working for us. And having a bigger support staff has also allowed us to extend our hours from 8 to 5. We used to have shorter hours because we just didn't have the staff capacity. So now we're more available to the public. And the last thing I wanted to say was that we asked some folks on campus to do this calculation for us and found that for every $1 that we receive from the Lane County tax measure, we've been able to turn that into $7 worth of services. And that's largely, again, because of our incredible volunteers and our collaborative partnerships with agencies. So I was almost done.
Very good.
So I'll ask what questions you have for us.
Okay, thank you so much. This is great. I really appreciate your presentation. I'm sure the commissioners do as well. And we do have some time for commissioners to make questions or comments. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. You know, when you came to us in 2015, 2016, with really an emergency on your hands, you were losing your facility, lots of other things were happening, it seemed like a fairly simple decision for us to put the levy on the ballot. And a tiny amount of money is leveraged, what, 1 to 7, ratio of 1 to 7 in volunteer work, $1 to $7. It's amazing. That is what I hoped and expected. And I will, so thank you and congratulations to the volunteers, the Lane County funded staff and the other people who make your job and really make it easier for people to can, easier for people to grow their own food, easier to put more nutritious food in front of themselves. But one thing I'd really like to thank you for, during my years as Executive Director of Food for Lane County, we got stuff that there's no way you could turn into a recipe. And you guys turn it into recipes for us.
We're good
so
at that.
We had tons, literally tons of powdered black beans. Remember anybody here remember the powdered black
Still
beans?
have some in our kitchen.
Well, you know, they take a long time to use
For
them, but they make
emergencies.
great muffins. You guys came up with a muffin recipe for powdered black beans. It was amazing. So the things that you do with the resources that you use just are leveraged so deep into the community. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And, you know, I've always had a soft spot for extension because I actually did some work for extension when I was working my way through college. It's on the soil and farming side of things. But, you know, it's, you know, the program has shown its value here, and people are really involved in it. And we actually took the extension master gardener model, and that's our master recycling program. You know, when you think about what we have here in Lane County, we took your model and said, you know, how can we teach people how to recycle and then also expand our volunteer base? And we have all these volunteer master recyclers, which we heard from some of them today in public testimony, you know, about their concerns on polystyrene. So it's, you know, it's a great model in a lot of ways, in a way of really expanding the impact of those educational programs. You know, and that's really what Extension's all about, is education. Only one criticism of the presentation, and I'm asking maybe later if I could be provided this. As an engineer and an analysis type person, I hate graphs with 2 data points. You know, it does not tell the story. I'd like, if I could get a year by year on the graphs you threw up there with, you know, somewhere back in the past and today may not show the entire picture.
You bet.
And so that's all I ask. But I really appreciate the work you all do, and we'll see if we can continue this partnership in the future. But I will say that we're getting a lot of demand on us for using our power to levy property taxes. We have folks asking us to float a $50 million housing bond. We are trying to get local match for a new courthouse. And lots of folks want us to do something about our rural patrol situation. So, yeah, it's not our only demand on what people want us to do with our taxing authority. So sooner rather than later, and making sure we get everybody together on this is going to be important.
Yeah, Patty was just poking me because I forgot to say that we are hoping to go for another tax measure this spring, and I was going to ask you to maybe direct your staff to work with us and see if the feasibility and maybe get started on that.
Yeah, and it's, I can't criticize you for doing that because we did the exact same thing with the jail levy. We went out a year early just in case we were unsuccessful, and we'd have time to adjust to that. So, you know, you guys are asking to do the same thing, so you're following our model.
It was a good idea.
We followed yours, now you're following ours.
Commissioner Buck.
Great job. I love the presentation, and I love to see little kids working with the animals and food preparation. You know, I've got a little one, and she loves to cook with mom and dad, mostly dad. But being able to increase that outreach to the kids, I think, is so meaningful because they remember those experiences as they grow, and they're more exploratory into new, bigger, funner things when it comes to food, animals, and I love the, you know, the tree, there was a slide that said like tree classes, and I just think that would be so fantastic for the little ones to learn about. So I'm supportive of your ask there at the end, and I hope that we could explore that here for your expected spring.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I have recently begun doing what I call arithmetic lessons, what my grandchildren called waffle making, wherein a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old is learning the basics of doubling the recipe. So I just want you to know I'm putting into practical effect at a very tiny level part of what you're talking about here. And my 8-year-old granddaughter says, "Oh, not that again, another math lesson," where the little one really loves to shove the waffle mix and water together. Anyway, as far as on the federal, state, and local partnership of extension, the federal role is a really important one because they provide under the Extension Acts funding to states. I'm just curious, what has that been like the last few years? I have not kept up at all with the federal funding for states. Is that down? Is that up? Is that unknown?
It goes down usually.
I believe when I was in the legislature that the trend was down for extension federally, and the Oregon State Legislature and the taxpayers of Oregon were funding a bigger role. But if you have anything that, in response to the question that Commissioner Bozievich asked about the graph, and I also would like to see a copy of whatever you send in or learn about that, if you could just grab something off the internet. I'm not asking for a lot of research, but just what has been the federal funding of extension, because it's state, it's federal, and it's local, and we are doing better with our part locally. I'm just curious about the federal end. And then regarding the local end, I'm trying to understand that there's both an extension, I guess, extension of the extension levy, but there's also maybe the idea that more local funding would be requested in this election. And I'm just curious if you have any written material yet on either your idea of getting a current tax measure extended as opposed to that plus adding to it. And have you come to any conclusions on that? Do you have any data on that? Do you want to tell us anything about that, or just tell us in writing later?
Well, I'll say that we're working on that, and we were hoping to visit with the tax assessor to sort of look at different models and try to predict needs.
Okay. What is the deadline if we wanted to put on the May ballot the extension of the existing? Have you been in touch with the elections officials to find out what that is?
It's February.
Yeah, it's sometime in the winter.
We'd have to start work in January.
I was going to say.
Start work in January and February is the deadline.
Well, we might want to think about, and you can kick this around, make a request to the board, but that sooner is better than later, because if we do have some time, which I don't know if we do, even as early as December, to get some ideas discussed, we have a better chance of meeting your and I think, I could be wrong, it's up to the board, obviously, all this is up to the board, but we have not had any presentations on either a courthouse, another courthouse vote, or a homeless or housing. I don't think that's going to be in May of next year. So I don't think anything would initially conflict, but I could be wrong. And is there a reason you were going to pick the May election? Yeah, because it's before the levy expires.
It's when you plan.
Before the levy expires, yeah.
There you go. You just do things in the spring. That's good. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for all your great work, and I hope to work with you on the extension. I really think that's important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one final word of encouragement. You know, during the years that I was doing the hiring for Jerry's Building Materials and for Gray's Garden Centers, if the resume included OSU Master Gardener, that person usually got the job. So that's pass that along. It's a great item on resumes. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's call up our friends from Cottage Grove and other places interested in the Community Health Center Clinic in Cottage Grove. Item 7A, Order 19-09-10-06, in the matter of delegating authority to the county administrator to submit grant applications to fund renovation and related startup funds for a new Community Health Centers of Lane County Clinic in Cottage Grove, Oregon. Karen Gaffney is here, and others from the Lane County Department of Health and Human Services. So I'll turn this over to Ms. Gaffney, and you can introduce the appropriate folks. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. And Ron was able to get our slides up. Excellent. Ron Jelm is with me today to provide an update on activities that have been happening since we were last with you in June to talk about the proposal to have a community health center clinic established in Cottage Grove. The topic is of high interest to the community of Cottage Grove, and we have a number of our partners and friends from the community who are here in the audience as well today. So thank you for being here. Ron and I are committed to keeping our presentation fairly brief so that there's plenty of opportunity for you to ask whatever questions you might have and help us move forward with our directions on next steps. As I said, this is an update from our presentation in update to you in June. So we can go to that next slide. Some of these early slides are a recap, particularly for the viewing audience if they weren't here for the conversation in June. Our current effort is after almost a decade, truly, of working with our partners in Cottage Grove. We are on the cusp of being able to develop a CHC site in the community that would provide primary care and integrated behavioral health. It's also a unique opportunity to work with existing partners, including Lane Community College, the school district, Peace Health, South Lane Mental Health, and others to really explore an integrated approach that addresses not only the provision of health care, which is clearly our primary mission in the health centers, but also is closely integrated with the education system to provide healthcare learning opportunities and development for the community in Cottage Grove. And then finally, also looking at dental services. There's been a lot of good work in Cottage Grove around dental services, and we believe that the FQHC model can really bring supports to that and help grow that in the community. So let's talk a little bit about where we are today. The slide, again, identifies some of those key partners that we have in the community and that group that has been working together closely to provide the vision and shape for this project. Over the summer, Be Your Best, which is a community coalition in Cottage Grove that's been working in support of the project, has solicited support for some initial community development around this project, and by support, I mean fundraising to help pay for a lot of the planning work that's in motion right now, and that funding is likely. And then I know when we were here in June, we talked with the board about interest from the Oregon Community Foundation in providing some significant support towards the capital that's required to move this project forward. And OCF has reviewed a draft project scope and budget for that work and is interested in pursuing in a little more detail some of the architectural planning and costs that we were able to provide kind of generically based on our past clinics, but they'll actually have an interest in looking at the specific site at LCC and refining and updating some of those costs. So that work has been in play this summer. What we talked with you about in June was that the county's partnership role as we envision it in this effort is for us to be able to operate the FQHC. So Ron went through detailed slides at that time around some budget projections. And that the community, for their part of this project, is working hard to secure the initial capital funds that would enable the facility to be ready for us to come and deliver a clinic in there. And that project will require additional funders. So that's our recap, and I'm going to turn it over to Ron to give the rest of the update.
Thank you, Karen. Commissioners, just a quick update on the timeline. Some of these you've seen before. This is a project that has been on the docket for many years and has had ongoing interest of the community and actually of the FQHC. We have, as you know, expanded multiple times over the last couple of years, and I think the timing is right to look and expand into Cottage Grove. Our timeline would be, as we identified, the bulk of this year to continue with community planning, and you can see from the folks who are here today, very active and supportive community outreach and activity in the community to support this. Continued active development during the coming year to really start to put the pieces together in a cogent way in terms of who would be doing what part of the project. And important components of that would be facility design, working with architects and engineers to actually design and then start the renovation and construction of a facility in 2020 so that we would be in a position to actually open that new site probably late in the first quarter or more likely the beginning of the second quarter of 2021. The financial projections are still a little tentative until we actually get in with engineers and architects and look at the building and actually do the building design. You never really know what the project is going to be until you get all of that and then get the bids back. But of course, we're looking at a clinic that would be roughly 5,200 square feet, which is about the size of our Brookside clinic, which would have 2 primary care teams, which we believe would be appropriate for that community, would have space for integrated behavioral health as well as alternative care. We've talked about the alternative care services that we provide for particularly pain reduction and opioid use. So we would incorporate those services into this clinic.
I'm sorry, Ron, you said 50 to 100 square feet.
5,200, roughly?
5,200, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Very tiny clinic.
Very small, covered. No, 5,200, thank you.
Conestoga Clinic.
And that we would have dental services. They do have an existing dental program, and that would be with this footprint additional to the 5,200 square feet for primary care and integrated behavioral health. The best estimate now for the renovation and opening costs would be about $1.8 million. These are the pieces that the community is looking to do fundraising and have grant opportunities for. The county would not bear any of those costs. That's what we are working with the community and other funders to identify how we might get that funding. Whether it be federal grants or local grants, and there are also grants that are available for rural expansion, particularly that this clinic might qualify for. Operational break-even from the time that we would open in the second quarter of 2021 would probably be in the late year 2 or year 3. That would not be unexpected as the program ramps up. And our operational cost to break even would be, let's say, in the neighborhood of $700,000 of county funds. Obviously, a number of opportunities to consider. For consideration first, in the opportunities, this squarely supports the county's current strategic plan of promoting safe and healthy counties. It improves access to preventive care and behavioral health and dental services in a rural community. It also promotes vibrant communities as part of economic development, certainly investing in a resilient and diverse and sustainable economy in that location, not just for the jobs that we would create in that clinic, which aren't a lot, but quite frankly, the promotion of health and well-being of the members of that community, which enable them to be a vibrant part of the workforce. Certainly, it improves rural access. There is sufficient market size. We have a number of patients who currently come to our facilities, most notably the Springfield Clinic or the other clinics. But what we also see is there are a number of folks who are Trillium members or uninsured individuals in that community who may have coverage, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're accessing care. So that would be an important component there. A wonderful opportunity is the high level of community engagement and the opportunity to engage multiple players at all levels throughout the community, and to do that in a way that is unique in that community. And certainly opportunities for potential funding. Oregon Community Foundation and others have expressed a great interest in supporting this in response to the community engagement. There are always challenges. Certainly, we don't have funding to date for the capital project. That is part of the ask today, is to move the next steps to approve a board order so that the county administrator can request that funding on behalf of the county. There's uncertainty in the CCO landscape, although a little more certainty since we last met. We now know that there are 2 CCOs that will be in our community, Pacific Source and Trillium, as of January 1st. We have a great relationship with Trillium. We anticipate we will also have an excellent relationship with Pacific Source, and I trust they will both be very supportive of improving access. With any project, there's always a question of bandwidth for the management team of the organization. We have plans in place to add additional support staff and leadership staff to support this expansion as we would with any others. With the opportunity of multiple players, as a challenge of multiple players, I view that as, a balance. For the most part, I think when you have multiple players involved, that provides real opportunity, and I think we can think about how we provide that engagement in the community to even do a better job of engaging communities in our current clinics, as well as thinking about how we can improve our access into rural Lane County beyond Cottage Grove and beyond a traditional bricks and mortar type facility. Certainly, as in any new startup, it requires close oversight so that you keep your eye on the ball and you're growing in the way and managing costs in the way that one would want to be able to have that expected investment over a couple years of $700,000 before you break even. You don't want that to turn into more than that. We have certainly demonstrated in our previous clinic openings our ability to manage openings and startups. And there is a balance in terms of other opportunities. There are always more things than you can do than you have resources for, but I think this makes sense in terms of the other opportunities that we might have to put on the shelf for a little while. So I did go through that relatively quickly so that you have the opportunity for questions or comments. We are asking decision points today would be to ask the board approval to continue to move forward with plans to open the CHC clinic in Cottage Grove. The specific board order would be to request grant funds for clinic renovation startup and to give the county administrator the authority to move forward with grant applications in that. And then that's a board order. The other would be to provide us the philosophical go-ahead, if you will, to move forward with the lease negotiations and other lease conversations so that we could bring those back at the appropriate time to the commission.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm sure Commissioner Buck has some questions, so we'll just call on her right away.
I don't necessarily have questions because I've been following this really closely and everybody's been keeping me informed along the way, and I really appreciate that very much. I find this to be an incredibly exciting moment. I know that this has been in the works for, as you said, a decade, and in fits and starts, and now it seems like everything's just aligning. We know we have support from Peace Health. We know we have support from LCC. We know we have great support from the community who is keenly interested in where this goes. I am 200% supportive of this whole thing, and I want to make sure that one of the things that I hear all the time is rural communities aren't connected with the metro communities. We're not getting the same services as the metro communities are getting. And this is a prime example of us trying to do a significant outreach in a very meaningful way to our smaller cities in Lane County. And I find that to be a huge step in the right direction. So you've got the support from me, and clearly, you got my head nod, and I support the order and hope to see this move along in the direction that you foresee.
Okay, other commissioners? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. Just a question regarding the break even. Now, this tiny question compared to the hugeness of the project, but you said break-evens in about 1 to 2 years, potentially with a $700,000 operational.
Yeah, probably toward the end of year 2.
Toward the end of it. Is that consistent with, for instance, Brookside?
Yes.
And so that's an experience that we've already had. And I wanted to mention Brookside. I was there at the grand opening of Brookside, golly, was it 5 years ago now?
It was 5 years ago. We just passed, if you can believe it, our 4th anniversary of the opening of our Delta Oaks Clinic.
Delta Oaks. And I was there for that opening too, but at Brookside, Commissioner DeFazio was there.
Yes.
And he talked about how community health centers originated here in Lane County, and that they were the brainchild of one of our employees, right? Which employee?
In fact, Congressman DeFazio called out Steve Manila for his amazing work in helping start our first FQHC here.
I always want to point out that, and I like to do it when Steve's not here, because he shoots me daggers whenever I say that. But to point out that Steve Manella really was instrumental in community health, in the federally qualified community health center concept, which is throughout the nation now. And it's exciting to me to see it happening in Cottage Grove, because as Commissioner Buck points out, the rural nature that we're addressing, a part of the county that hasn't been addressed. And our community health centers, regardless of family situation, regardless of income, regardless of your ability to pay, we serve. And to provide that to Cottage Grove and the surrounding rural area and surrounding communities is so exciting. So thank you very much. And really, once again, I hate to say that in front of Steve because he's such a self-effacing and humble person. But really, the fact that it started here in Lane County, we should never forget that. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bozevich?
Thank you. And, our federally qualified health centers are just an incredible model that we have. I was there for Delta also, and it's just a great service we're providing. And in fact, in that service, we're actually now, some of our provision, and particularly our reduction in opioid use, is being now modeled by other FQHCs across the country. So our staff, in their desire to serve and provide solutions, figured out how to get a 40% reduction in opioid use, with everything from meditation and acupuncture to yoga, and, did such a fantastic job that it just happened to be that the folks that certify us and all that were here and said, wow, you guys are doing great, and they're going to take that to all the other FQHCs across the country. We continually, in public health, are doing things that everyone else is going, wow, that should be a national model. Like our fatal crash investigation team, is being looked at as a national model, and trying to deal with that issue, public health issue. So it's just, time and time again. How many FQHCs do we currently have?
We currently have 6 primary care.
So this will be our 7th. And it's really our core wheelhouse for service. Is it kind of, if you think about, what do we do well? And they generally provide, primary care, both. And one of the great things we've done is wrap mental health into them. We co-locate mental health with the physical health, but it's this primary care facility. And I look at this as an extension of that wheelhouse and what we should keep doing. I know we're getting a lot of public requests to step into other areas of medical provision that are outside of our wheelhouse. And I hope we don't get distracted by that. And we stay focused on this, particularly when it comes to expanding to rural areas. I know Cottage Grove is not my district, but my district includes Crow Applegate Lorraine School District, which, that clinic will service a lot of that district probably. And I'm hoping that if we're successful with this one, the next one ends up in Florence maybe. There's also some LCC facility down there and some other, and I know the school district is looking at a bond measure. They might have space, who knows? We'll have partners down there, I'm sure. But, I really think this is a great model. I do share some of the concerns about, when you had the risk involved. I have a lot of concern around the financial operational viability. Based under our new labor contracts, we know our costs are increasing, yet we're kind of capitated on what we can get reimbursement-wise per patient. So it's, we don't automatically get more back from the system if we agree to increase costs in labor. So we're balancing, trying to make up some of that. So your bullet point about being very closely monitoring that operational finances, I'm right on for you, that you're already recognizing that up front. The other issue I'm a little concerned about is the challenge of behavioral health indemnification by the federal government and their lack of indemnifying in a particular case. And as we co-locate behavioral health with physical health, which is where it should be, are we putting ourselves at risk, financially? I mean, that was the whole point of FQHCs. That was the model. The federal government was going to hold us harmless, and we wouldn't have to carry malpractice insurance, and same thing with our mental health system. And then it turns out when we finally are challenged on the mental health side, we're kind of being stonewalled by the federal government right now. That stonewalling continues, it puts at risk our ability to co-locate behavioral health. And to me, that's kind of only giving half the health care. So those are the two risk factors I see in this. But other than that, I fully support moving forward with the grant applications and working on the other issues with the many partners. And I love the fact that there are many partners in Cottage Grove that really want this facility there.
Karen, go ahead.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Brozovich, I appreciate you lifting up, the concerns, because we absolutely want to make sure what we create is sustainable. The community counts on us to be able to do that. So I'm all about not overpromising, and I want to reassure that we're being very careful about the financial modeling as well as the risk modeling on this. And I think it's an opportunity in particular to talk about the financial model, the opportunity that this clinic offers us, certainly in terms of that funding model, is in a capitated system, we get paid for being able to see more patients. And so this does, in addition to providing access to people who might not be getting care anywhere, it does provide us additional revenue and resources into the clinic by opening up in a whole new community where we might bring additional people in. And I think the other part of both that financial piece and the access to care that's so important to people who live in this community is knowing that we absolutely have to keep our eye on our productivity and how we're making sure that we're providing the high quality care that people need and that we're making sure people get seen. And so that's absolutely a lens that we bring to all of this too, not only in the new clinic, but in our existing clinics, of making sure that we're really providing that access to care that people need.
I'll just make a few remarks and questions, and then call on Commissioner Buck. Maybe we can have a motion to approve this at that time. Well, first of all, this is a really exciting day because we are providing the policy directive that you've asked for, and I don't want to let the ceremonial moment go that this is a very important step in the whole process of putting forth and getting this order approved so we can get these grant applications submitted, and hopefully, given the cooperation that's gone into this, get the funding necessary to open the clinic. And I, for one, am very supportive of all of this. I am concerned about a particular facet of it, and that is, as was mentioned, if we increase the number of people, the capitation, as the terminology is used, we will get more money into the clinic, and that's a very good thing. Having said that, one of the bullet points, I think it was the last one on the previous slide, was may delay opportunity for other CHC development areas. And so I wanted to kind of ask a few questions, and maybe you have this information more or less in a encapsulated form in your head already, or maybe you'll need to provide it in the form of maybe an email. But what I wanted to know was you do hear up here from time to time from the commissioners a certain perspective about whether their area or areas are being underserved or not. And one of those might be areas outside of the Eugene-Springfield metro area. So we're talking the unincorporated part or the small cities within Lane County that would include Cottage Grove in a kind of macro sense of either in the metro area or not in the metro area. But also within urban areas, there's a healthcare access issue. Obviously, somewhat income related, but not necessarily always income related, that poor areas, whether urban or rural, or rich areas, whether urban or rural, that we tend to see more healthcare needs, unmet needs in the underserved areas. So I'm curious whether you have some kind of data, not simply urban-rural, not Eugene versus Cottage Grove or Eugene versus Springfield, but really into a more geographically nuanced sense of areas of the county and whether they're being underserved or not. And that would include rural Lane County and urban Lane County. So the nuances between, say, the differences in my district between, say, Whitaker versus the South Hills. Well, I'm no expert on healthcare policy, but I would suspect that the poor area of Eugene would have more challenges than the more affluent part of Eugene. And similarly, I'll bet you those same things exist in certain parts of rural Lane County. I wonder, do you have data on either income by census tract and then say participation in CHC by census tract? Do you have that kind of detail?
We do have a great deal of data in terms of where our current patient populations come from, by income, by a number of demographic factors.
Do you have it by geographic, like by commissioner district, for example?
We could have, but we don't. I mean, I don't have that at my fingertips, but we can certainly identify.
I mean, are 20% of your residents in each of the 20% of your patients are in each of the 5 districts, just sort of at that level?
It's certainly discoverable. I don't have that, but we could quickly identify what that is, because we do have our census tract and zip code data for where our current patients come from. What is more of a challenge in terms of access is not where do our patients come from, it's what are the total patient populations throughout the county, and are they receiving access? Certainly many of them have coverage. The Medicaid coverage would have coverage through Trillium, or will have now coverage through one of a couple CCOs. And as I said, coverage doesn't necessarily mean access. So Trillium would have some of that data in terms of are they receiving services and where. One of the areas for opportunity that might be a little delayed, although we're really making some headway in non-bricks and mortar opportunities. As an example, one of the potentially underserved populations that we have one of our care teams doing a pilot project on and has been doing for the last number of months is how to do better outreach and connection with patients who are our patients who are living in skilled nursing facilities. Now, these are individuals who have lots of obstacles and barriers to get into our clinic. And one of our physicians and a couple of members of his care team are actually going out into the skilled nursing facility. They've been doing rounds in the facility. They're doing med management and medication reconciliation, doing all those things that have been really benefits to those individuals who have a hard time, not only to the individuals, but to the facilities, making that to the primary care appointment in the bricks and mortar. And we're about to now explore how we might even do video conferencing into that facility so that you can have more efficient use of that provider and that care team. So maybe we have a nurse going out to that facility at the other end of that video conference as opposed to 2 nurses and a provider. So that's an improvement of efficiencies. One of the challenges of expanding that type of technology into the rural communities is does the community have the bandwidth and that connectivity that would allow that rural resident to have that access. So that's a little of, a conundrum that's beyond our ability to influence. We're also looking at whether there are other options, whether that be other telemedicine or mobile clinics or, other types of things. But the reality is, to some degree, there are lots of opportunities out there, and you have to say, well, okay, how do we pick and choose those that would have?
Well, in sort of a symbolic gesture of hands across the sea, I would like to, say that I'm really in favor of this program, but I also would be very open to receiving any data that would show whether or not rural communities are being underserved vis-a-vis urban communities, and particularly the income distribution, to make sure that poor people throughout the county are equally served as best we're able to. And I know Commissioner Buck will want to make a motion here.
I appreciate the conversation about alternative ways to reach out to rural communities. I've been working diligently on rural internet broadband, which kind of ties into that, and telemedicine is one of those huge things that they would love to see, especially in places that we know it's hard to access and when travel time makes it prohibitive in order to even go there. But that's a whole nother ball of wax I'm working on too. But it is my pleasure to approve item 7A, order 19-09, or move approval of order -1909-10-06 in the matter of delegating authority to the county administrator to submit grant applications to fund renovation and related startup funds for new community health centers of Lane County, CHCLC clinic in Cottage Grove.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Bozovich to approve the order as presented. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The board adopts the order by a vote of 4-0. Commissioner Bernie excused. And thank you so much for all your great work.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
And we are now ready to call up our Public Works folks for item 8A, order 19-09-10-07, in the matter of approving the design concept for Sears Road Fixed Object Removal Project. I know Ms. Kepler is not here, so who is making this presentation, and could they introduce everybody at the table?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Becky Taylor. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner.
And I'm Steve Gallup, Traffic Engineer for the county. We're the B team. Peggy's not here. She's the A team, Peggy and Dan.
That's debatable. Peggy's great, but so are you guys.
Nobody hears about SEAL Team 5, do they? I mean, nobody hears about the other one, the other people doing the same work. So go for it.
Okay, thank you. So we're here today to present a revised recommendation for this project for the board's consideration. We believe this revised recommendation balances Lane County's traffic safety commitment toward zero deaths with the public concerns that we heard about removing trees along Sears Road. We are looking for ways to engineer safer roadways, and this project originated from ODOT's All Roads Transportation Safety Program. We'll provide you with a refresher about the project, and we'll detail the revised staff recommendation in our staff presentation. But first, we want to acknowledge Commissioner Buck for her leadership on this project, and also to ODOT for working with us to create a viable project consistent with the funding. And we do really appreciate the high level of public participation in this project. In addition to creating a project that improves safety, we realize the greatest opportunities with this project are to deepen the discussion and understanding around our safety priorities and our commitment to reducing Lane County's staggering statistics on fatal and severe injury collisions, and also creating trust and transparency with the public and the board by demonstrating our commitments to public involvement. As a reminder, the project is on Sears Road between Molitor Hill Ranch Road and Row River Road. The project originated from the All Roads Transportation Safety Funding, which is administered by ODOT. And this is a data-driven program based on crash data and proven effective countermeasures to reduce safety risks. Sears Road was identified through this program for safety funding to remove fixed objects because the crash data reported fixed object collisions on Sears Road as exceeding statewide averages. Removing fixed objects from the clear zone has been proven to reduce fatal and severe injury collisions. This is an engineering tool from our safety toolbox that's consistent with national best practices and Lane County's Transportation Safety Action Plan. To explain more about the ARTS program, this uses federal funds on public roads in Oregon managed by ODOT. Funding allocations are prioritized towards problems that are worse than statewide averages and towards solutions that are low cost and high benefit. Any elements included in the scope and paid for with the safety funds must be shown to be cost-effective treatments that reduce fatal and severe injury collisions. This data-driven funding does not provide a lot of flexibility. It prescribes where and how the funding is to be spent. It's important for us to expand our safety vocabulary as we work on creating a safety culture. So to explain what a clear zone is, it's an unobstructed area next to the road. It's an area of forgiveness to provide drivers with an opportunity to self-correct and recover rather than an unforgiving roadway in which one of many potential mistakes leads to fatal or severe outcomes. Clear zones have been proven to reduce fatal and severe injury collisions. Again, this is a tool in our safety toolbox consistent with our Transportation Safety Action Plan. To touch on our Safety Action Plan, in 2017, Lane County made a significant commitment to reduce our fatal and severe injury collisions by adopting a Transportation Safety Action Plan, and we also joined the National Strategy on Highway Safety known as Towards Zero Deaths. The two most important findings from our safety work are listed here on this slide. Most fatalities are occurring in rural areas as the result of roadway departures, and this means we can reduce roadway departures in rural areas. We could actually work towards zero deaths. Roadway departure countermeasures, they're engineering tools, and they include helping people from leaving the roadway, such as installing rumble strips, and then also, when people do leave the roadway, providing an area of forgiveness with a clear zone free of fixed objects. Commissioner Buck joined staff in a public meeting on July 29th at the Cottage Grove Community Center. More than 20 area residents attended the meeting and participated in a roundtable discussion on preferred outcomes. We captured a lot of ideas for improving safety that are outside the scope of this project, but are things we'll continue to explore when different funding opportunities arise. Something we heard public support for, which ODOT said they would allow within this funding, is the installation of centerline rumble strips. So just a reminder about what centerline rumble strips are. And our revised recommendation does include installing centerline rumble strips on Sears Road. The photo in this slide is an example of a centerline rumble strip that we installed on Poodle Creek Road in 2017. And these have been proven to reduce fatal collisions, and they're relatively low cost. But there are other considerations, such as impacts to bicyclists and noise generation. And that's to say that addressing safety is a complex issue. There's no easy answers, and everything has trade-offs. The residents along Sears Road told us that they would accept the noise impacts and are supportive of the centerline rumble strips. We also consulted a couple of bicycle riding experts who confirmed that the centerline rumble strips would be acceptable to them. Biking safety was more of a concern for them along the shoulder, so we are not proposing any bumps or grooves on the shoulder. Now to the most significant portion of the recommendation revision. I'm going to turn it over to Steve Gallup, our traffic engineer.
Thank you, Becky. I have the fun part of this presentation because I'm very excited to tell you that we went from 60 trees to be removed down to 6. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Buck for the opportunity to be able to do that, and all of you guys, all the commissioners, to be able to kind of send us back to the property owners and to meet with them and to come up with a compromise. And I feel like staff's worked really hard to be able to get where we're at now with this compromise, as well as working with the property owners and even ODOT. ODOT was at this meeting, and they were willing to come down on some of the requirements to be able to receive funding for this project. And 6 trees is the minimum amount that they're expecting to be removed for this project. So we're going to go through a few slides here, and it's going to show you kind of the 6 tree locations that we're going to be removing. And again, we tried to pick the trees that were with the kind of the greatest risk, that were very close to the road, or that were on curves and have the potential for a greater risk of crashes. We did listen to some of the property owners, of course, all the property owners that were at the meeting. We had a very extensive process of going through, listening to their concerns, and trying to identify the areas that we could best, come up with this removal of trees, and as well as trying to compromise with the property owners. And one of the things that we're hearing about is that a lot of them like the trees, a lot of kind of the row of trees along their property is kind of more of a screening to help protect them from cars, of course, and noise and things with their houses, residents. Next slide. So the first slide here is the southern end. This is as we leave Row River. This one is kind of more the area that is more highly density with property owners and residents, and we're proposing, of course, to remove no trees along this end. So move to the next one here. So the first tree that we are proposing to remove is actually a fir tree with a row of arborvitaes. And so we're proposing to remove this tree. It is on the curve, a little more of a high-risk tree. We did listen to the property owner that is adjacent to this tree here that's being proposed to remove. They are in favor. They're okay. We're removing this tree. They did want to leave the row of trees there for a screening, which we are proposing to leave. And we believe that we can remove this fir tree without damaging those other trees. So the second tree that we want to remove is a little further north up on Sears Road as we kind of start into the curves. This one's a little closer to the road, and we have also received permission to remove this tree from the property owner adjacent to this one.
Is that an alder tree?
I think so, yeah. And that one was also kind of damaged during the last storm that we had, big storm. We, as you proceed a little further north on Sears Road, this slide gives you kind of a good perspective of how many trees are out there. And of course, along this stretch of Sears Road, we're not proposing to remove any trees. This, the property on the right there of the road is owned by one property owner, and kind of gives you a perspective of how many trees are out there. As we proceed further north on the same property owner, we're proposing to remove the four trees. So this would make it the total of 6 trees. And one of the trees kind of in the middle picture there that's kind of next to that shelter is one of the trees that was identified originally as the high-risk tree as far as how close it is to the road. And so we're proposing to remove that one as well as an isolated tree a little further south, and then 2 trees that kind of meet at the base there along the riverbank. We're proposing to remove. They are on an inside of a turn, those top 2 trees there. And By removing those trees will also help to create a better kind of sight distance as you go around that turn, that curve there. The property owner was preferred not to have these trees removed, but at the same time, she indicated if they are removed, she would like to have them chipped, and then, of course, the chips given to her, which we can accommodate for that to happen. And the next slide here is we get to the north end of the project, and of course, we're not proposing to remove any trees there. So what we're asking is for you today to approve our design as far as removing 6 right-of-way trees and install centerline rumble strips on Sears Road. And I also like to just concluding here, echo about what Becky was saying, that again, our playbook that we're using, I kind of mentioned this last time, is our Transportation Safety Action Plan. That's a playbook that we're following here. And this countermeasure that we're using as far as removal of fixed objects is actually one of our action items that we're following. And we feel like I said, we've worked hard to get at this point, and we feel like have really contributed towards our efforts towards 0 deaths with this project. That kind of concludes our presentation.
Okay, so Commissioner Buck?
Great presentation. I think that really concisely put together everything that we talked about at these meetings with the residents. I really want to give my appreciation to all the residents that showed up initially here when this was first presented, as well as in the follow-up meetings. Their input really meant a great deal, and it meant a great deal to them that we paused and we listened to what they really wanted in their neighborhood. Although it wasn't as many trees as originally proposed, I think the addition of the rumble strips is a huge improvement that we didn't even know was possible in the very beginning. And with ongoing conversations with ODOT, who was a very friendly partner in this, we were able to take the time we needed to really delve into what are all the possibilities in this particular grant. And when we then presented them back to the community, they really were very interested in the rumble strips, which I actually found a little bit shocking. But I'm glad that they were, because I know that that's a really good deterrent for not only what we were seeing in deaths in that particular area, which mostly are speeding and alcohol or other addictions in play in those particular accidents. So I think the rumble strips will really help out. And hopefully we'll find money in the future to do some of the other really great ideas that they suggested, which are issues and solutions all over the rest of rural communities, especially in the unincorporated roads that we have that have some concentration of houses and neighborhoods like this. So thank you. Great job. I'm very supportive, and I hope fellow board members will be as well.
And you'd like to move approval?
I can do that. I will move approval of item 8A, order number 19-09-10-07, in the matter of approving the design concept for Sears Road fixed object removal project.
Okay, Commissioner Buck's moved approval of the order. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Farr. Further discussion? Commissioner Bozievich?
Thank you. I guess, we did come to a compromise with the citizens out there, but I have to express my concern. Fixed object removal is really an important piece of our safety plan. And to go from 60 down to 6, we wouldn't identify those 60 if they weren't a hazard. And we had a fatality yesterday, fixed object, collision on Coburg Road, north of Coburg there. I just hope that, as them and their families and their relatives travel Lane County, that they don't end up having a collision with a fixed object. And that the myopathy, and this is almost sort of like the NIMBY disease. I'm okay with removing fixed objects, except for if it's my tree, I want our roads to be safe, except for removing my trees, and we have to get people past that somehow or another. Allowing the rumble strips in a residential area, it'll be interesting to see what they think in 2 years. We made a mistake installing some rumble strips coming up to a hazardous stop sign near a residential area down there at Green Hill and Royal. And we ended up having to pull them out and repave that area of the roadway because the residents had a fit, even though we had had several bad collisions in that intersection where people ran the stop sign in the dark, So it's, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if in 2 or 3 years we're not hearing from residents out there about the noise as people cross center line, because it amazes me how many people can't drive between the fog line and the center line. And I watch it all the time, and I actually have a friend that takes video of it happening at that little curve there just past No-Tie on Highway 126, just a little bit west of Poodle Creek Road there. See it constantly. I've seen school bus drivers cross center line there, so really part of what we have to get after here somewhat is the enforcement end of the 4Es. And as we're thinking about the board and the allocation of our valuable resources and the use of tax dollars and using up our goodwill of our voters, don't forget that expanding rural patrol also expands enforcement. And of the 4Es, that when it comes to driver behavior, that's one of the biggest movers. I mean, we're doing a lot of this because it's a driver behavior issue. You don't have a lane departure unless you're going too fast, you're impaired, or distracted. All driver behaviors. And the biggest impact on driver behavior is enforcement, not engineering. Engineering is a way of kind of foam rubber padding the world for folks that don't want to drive correctly. So I will support the motion, but I'm a little bit disappointed that we're kind of caving into this reverse NIMBYism of, I want my roads safe except for the tree in my front yard.
That kind of gets to my question, and that is, I guess, having this board order in front of us and all the great work that was put into this, not only by you, but by Commissioner Buck, by the neighbors, in coming to this, are we in fact making a compromise that is being made for the purpose of acquiring the state money, and that really the compromise is a safety compromise in order to minimize local opposition to the removal of those other 54 trees?
Mm-hmm. I would say this safety problem that we have is a big problem, and it's complex. We need all of the E's working together. It's going to be a long game. We're going to be in front of you for years and years and years working on this problem, and a big part of it is creating a safety culture. I feel like this project is in this one step in the right direction. It's not the full solution, it's not the perfect solution, but it will, I believe, improve safety, and we've got external funding to implement it.
And then what is the, you had a slide on this, I believe, the centerline rumble strips, the efficacy or the proven deliverables, I guess, on the centerline rumble strip. Could you go over that, just that slide for us?
The statistic here is a 30% reduction in fatal collisions with the centerline rumble strip installation.
So on any given mile, on an overall large scale, you put this in, you get a 30% reduction. If it's 100 yards, you'll get that 30% reduction on that 100 yards on average. If you do it for 300 miles or 1,500 miles, you'll get that 30% reduction.
So these are national averages.
Yep.
We are taking inventory of our own implementation, which we'll be tracking with crash data over time to see what our statistics are, but this is a national average.
Okay. And then what is meant by cost-benefit ratio?
High benefit for low cost.
Okay.
We install these typically with our pavement preservation work, so it's just adding a piece of equipment to the paving machinery. We're already out there, and it's easy to install.
Okay. And then is there opposition by a bicyclist to the center line rumble strip? You have bikes up there.
I have not heard opposition from our bicycle advocates on this proposal. We did have two bicycle experts from Gears and also from our Transportation Advisory Committee who were comfortable with the centerline rumble strips.
Okay. What would it cost if we just did all of Lane County roads for center rumble strips?
We could develop an estimate for you. I don't have that.
I mean, if it's a 90-to-1 return on investment, that seems really high, and a 30% reduction would, since we have so many of these deaths on rural roads.
Thank you for that question. I really appreciate that question because part of our toolbox, we feel confident that we can implement system-wide, and we believe centerline rumble strips is one of those tools. Other tools are more context-sensitive, like tree removal or shoulder rumble strips, where we need to be more cautious about where homes are located. We are integrating the system-wide implementation as part of our pavement preservation because that's the lowest cost implementation for us. So it's something that we're hoping to achieve over time.
Do you ever watch the TV show Inside Edition? I highly recommend you not do so, but do you?
I don't.
Okay, good. That's good that you don't. It's a TV show, kind of like a expose type news, I guess I would call it, and I accidentally watched it the other day, and it featured a gentleman and his spouse asleep in their cars as they were driving down a freeway in suburban Boston, and their car apparently has the ability of driving somewhat in a straight line or following traffic, and they were sleeping in their car, and the other car had their phone up like this, filming them for like 10 minutes. And
who's worse, the people asleep or the people using their cell phone?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing was interesting, and I just apologize for watching that TV show first and foremost, but that's another one of these driver distractions, is apparently people can fall asleep in their cars now if they have the right technology. And the manufacturer was saying, well, it said to activate it, you have to say you will keep awake, you will keep your hands on the wheel, you will drive the car, but that kind of technology apparently is out there. So it's coming. So maybe it'll help reduce some parts of accidents. The guy wasn't crashing into anybody, he was just sleeping, so I guess.
National Lampoon's Vacation.
No fault, no foul in basketball. So any further discussion on this, Commissioner?
Could you roll back to your slide that has percent reductions on the clear zones? Yeah, so, we're talking center line 30%. That's somewhere between the 22 and the 44% if you actually get clear zone, get rid of fixed objects. So it's a little bit more effective than maybe doing a small clear zone, but less effective than doing a full clear zone, having a centerline rumble strips. So that just, to put that in perspective, that 30% reduction's not really as good as having a true clear zone in recovery area. The other thing about it is it does have a noise impact. People drag their rear wheels quite often in trailers over center lines, and in residential areas, if there are residences around, you will hear about that. They are noisy. That's why they wake people up and keep them over the center line. But a lot of newer cars now have automated systems where they sense the lines for you, and if you get close to the line, they actually make a false rumble in the steering wheel. My Ford Expedition has that, and it feels just like hitting a rumble strip. But it doesn't steer the car. You can't fall asleep, but it will wake you up if you're drifting.
Very good. Okay, any further remarks regarding the presentation of the order? Good? Okay, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. Commissioner Bernie excused. Thank you so much for your great work.
Thank you.
Keep rumbling on. Ha-ha. All right.
Where did the embarrassment?
Thank you, Commissioner.
So next up, we have,
I had to embarrass her before she got up here.
She was the Public Employee of the Year a couple of years.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We haven't heard that
I was
recently.
trying to explain that our fatal crash investigation team's a national model, so.
So we are here now to hear item 9A, County Council announcements. And with that item is our County Council, Steve Dingle. Any County Council announcements?
Chair Sorensen and members of the board, I apologize. First of all, I'm in the throes of a cold. But the only announcement I have, I don't have any specific announcements, but I do have an order which I assume is in front of you. It's 19-09-10-08. This is a follow-up. You'll recall that the board has set a work session for October 16th on the aerial spray referral issue. And the sequence of events were that I prepared a memorandum dated, trying to find it real quick, sometime earlier this summer. The board voted to waive the attorney-client privilege as it related to that specific opinion and the attachments. Subsequent to that, Mr. Meek, an attorney who's working with the proponents of that measure, filed two documents that had different dates on them that were essentially a response to the memorandum that I had prepared. And then my staff and I prepared a response to that dealing with new issues that were raised there for the first time. And this would waive attorney-client privilege as to that second opinion that was written so that it would get posted online like the other one did and would be available to everyone ahead of the October 16th work session.
Okay, so we'll turn to item 9B, Order 19-09-10-08. Is there a motion to approve the order?
I'll move approval of item 9B, Order 19-09-10-08, in the matter of waiving attorney-client privilege in the matter of ORS 294-100.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich to approve Order 19-09-10-08. Further discussion? Commissioner Bozovich.
So I'm going to vote in favor of waiving our attorney-client privilege in this case. But I just want to state quickly that this is a disturbing trend to have third-party special interest groups taking up a lot of staff time at the direction of the board, particularly in this case where I don't care, what Mr. Meek's opinion is. He is not our attorney. I cannot use his recommendation as any defense in the court. He's not going to indemnify us. So I don't, his opinions have little to no value to the board. And yet we are spending an incredible amount of time back and forth with him. And then we're going to hold a work session where we're going to hear his arguments about our liabilities when his arguments hold no force for us. And we seem to be doing a lot of assignments where we're specifically directing staff to work with specific special interest people, and it's starting to really burn some staff time. We should be very careful about doing that in the future.
Okay, further comments on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. Commissioner Bernie excused, and the order is adopted. Thank you very much. We'll see you at 3 o'clock, or at least,
I will, efforts to everyone in a small room, I'm going to participate in that via telephone.
Very good. Thank you so much. Okay, I'd like to take up item 10A and then recess till 1:30. So, Mr. Mokrzycki, do you have any announcements?
I do, Mr. Chair. I have 4, what I think will be relatively quick. Couple of positive announcements I wanted to share with the board. I don't think we've talked about this publicly, but the Portland Business Journal each year ranks the top 10 healthiest employers across the state, divided by size of organization. So in the large employer category, Lane County for the 3rd year in a row was ranked number 3 in the state. Port of Portland was number 1, Safe Corporation was number 2, and Lane County was number 3. So I'll pass this around to the commissioners. Just a few things that they noted, the Portland Business Journal noted in its ranking that last year participation among Lane County employees in health screenings jumped from 35% to 64%. Employee engagement with the Live Well Center increased from 31% to 49%. 370 out of 813 at-risk employees improved 1 or more risk factors, and 274 employees participated in on-site financial counseling sessions, among other things. So really excited about this statewide ranking and the positive work that's happening in the collaboration of and participation by our employees in all of our health and wellness opportunities, where we've really tried to lead with an incentive-based model. And that continues to have a great impact, both in terms of productivity and reduced time off from illness, as well as reduction in costs to taxpayers. Secondly, I wanted to note that September is National Preparedness Month, and Lane County is offering a number of opportunities for staff and citizens in our community to become more prepared. So a few of those. For our staff in the month of September, we are offering 4 training opportunities to better understand local hazards and the impacts, as well as our capabilities and limitations as a local government in responding to those natural disasters and emergencies, as well as making sure that our employees have the tools necessary as individuals to be prepared for, as individuals and their families to be prepared for those events. We're also offering an emergency supply kit for purchase program. It's currently in our technology, it's being displayed in our technology services office. It will be up in county administration tomorrow, and it's sort of making its way around the organization, providing opportunities for employees to purchase at a discount some of these emergency supply kit tools. We've also embarked on a media campaign to increase awareness and participation in National Preparedness Month in coordination with our regional public information officer groups, so raising awareness throughout the community about the need for emergency preparedness. And then finally, there will be an emergency preparedness fair on September 18th in the park blocks from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for community members and our employees to obtain additional information on programs and products, increasing our readiness for the next special weather event. I'll add that on Thursday of this week, Thursday, September 12th, there's a Mayor's Emergency Management Summit hosted by the mayors of Eugene and Springfield, and our own Patience Whittingham Melcher is speaking towards the end of that session, I think around 3 o'clock, talking about emergency preparedness throughout Lane County. Let's see.
So who was on the cover of the rural?
Bring it. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Commissioner. The Rural Light magazine, which is the Lane Electric, and this afternoon I'll bring it, and I'm sure Commissioner Buck has received it, as I know Commissioner Bozovich has. Patience Whittingham Melcher, our emergency manager, is on the cover with her Lane County Emergency Management logo and sort of displaying a number of tools from the toolkit of emergency preparedness readiness tools on the cover of that. And so that was she's just done a fantastic job of outreach throughout the community, particularly in our rural communities, building partnerships, having a presence, demonstrating value. Probably one of the, more well-known county staff officials in our rural communities. And so,
Heard her on the radio yesterday morning.
What radio station was she?
KPNW Wake Up Call. She
great.
did an interview there about preparedness.
Yeah, and she lives up the Mackenzie River and doing a fantastic job with all of that work. So that is two. The third one I wanted to just note on, there's public comment this morning, and I'll pass around the annual report that Mr. Sussman handed me. This is from the town of Lexington, Massachusetts, an annual report. I, for one, think it's a good idea. I mean, I think an annual report itself is not a novel concept, certainly something that we could pursue. I want to share with the board, and I think it is a good way, as he indicated, it's a good marketing tool to kind of summarize some basic information, financial information, strategic priorities. What I want to make sure, and this certainly could be a discussion tomorrow if we have time to talk about it at the board's retreat or to further at a future meeting. We do a number of things on this, and so I just want to make sure that before we add another document that we're preparing and putting out there, that the board and the public understand sort of all the things we have available, and then we make a decision about what do we think is most valuable and beneficial to the community. Each year we put out this Lane County budget in brief. We've done this the last few years. It's a very simple threefold, and it is after the board, the budget committee and the board approve and adopt the annual budget. We kind of do a breakdown of where's the money coming from, where's it going, what are the key initiatives in the budget this year, what are our strategic priorities and kind of focus areas. So we're preparing this. I'm not sure it's final yet, but we'll have this, and this is a nice handout to give to residents, very simple. We do, Mr. Sussman mentioned the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. We do this every year. It's available. It's a rather lengthy document, and it's sort of a point in time look back prepared with the assistance of our our financial auditors, and it's reviewed annually by Moss Adams as part of our annual financial audit. And then, of course, the adopted budget document. I mean, this is the most comprehensive financial and strategic document we have. It talks both about where the money is coming from, where it's going within each department, initiatives within each department that are occurring throughout the course of a year, what's been accomplished in the last year, what we're looking at doing going forward. Of course, the board knows we have a strategic plan document as well. So all that is to say, and then, we have our one-page strategic plan piece there. We certainly can do an annual annual report. Again, I think it would have value. I just want to make sure that the staff time and work and going into that is in the context of all the other things that we're doing, and the board really sees it as something that would be valuable for you, for the public generally, and for you to share with constituents. Finally, and a follow-up on an assignment, a previous assignment that commissioners had made regarding Community Corrections Act. I believe Commissioner Bozovich had received head nods previously for sending a letter to the State Department of Corrections regarding the potential option for Lane County to opt out of parole and probation. This is because of the decline that we've seen in Community Corrections Act funding. We've been in the process of preparing that. In that process, staff's identified that we're not aware of any other counties that are seriously considering that opt-out. We've also become aware that both Douglas County and Lynn County, the counties to the north and south of Lane, their parole and probation operations are provided by the state. So it may be in the state's strategic benefit to see all three counties, Douglas, Lane, and Lynn, as part of that. We certainly don't believe, at least at the staff level, that we feel really strongly that the quality of parole and probation services that we're able to provide at the local level far exceeds what the state would be able to provide. So we remain concerned about the financial constraints and lack of funding from the state to provide the level of service that we need, but we do believe that the quality of service that we're able to provide is much greater than the state's would be. I want to also add that since that request was made, the Multnomah Board of Commissioners held a well-publicized hearing on CCA funding in late September, recognizing that their relative percentage of CCA funds dropped by about 2%, which is a huge dollar amount decline, about $5 million cut, and it resulted in significant programmatic changes both to the Justice Reinvestment Act as well as the Community Corrections Act funding. That made its way as a headline story in the Oregonian. The governor's office was subsequently quoted in there talking about county programs needing more transparency and evidence-based practices before the governor would support additional funding. So we want to bring this back to the board and just say, that we're really concerned about any perception about lack of transparency and accountability at the local level for those funds. This board knows, certainly Commissioner Bozievich serves on the Public Safety Coordinating Council. Those are public meetings that receive public comment. They're noticed, receive public comment. There's a budget committee with public officials, elected and appointed public officials, including state officials that serve on the Public Safety Coordinating Council. Any recommendations for allocation of resources from the PSCC Budget Committee and committee itself come to the Board of Commissioners for ultimate approval and adoption in a public meeting with public comment. So there's a lot of publicity around this and a lot of collaboration. Frankly, Lane County has been called out as a model in the state for that work. So two final things I want to note: that there is a joint hearing of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees on September 18th during the legislative days, and then we're also working to organize a second hearing during the November legislative days to further hone a request of $20 to $25 million of additional funding in the February short session. The advocacy we participated in sought $50.9 million for the every 6-year cost study mandated under Oregon law. So that's a lot of information. I just want to share all of that. And our suggestion, I wanted to come back to the board and seek, and we can take this up under your review of assignments later in board requests, but this issue has evolved, and we believe that there may be an opportunity to sort of rethink our strategy around sending that letter on the potential opt-out, maybe think about clarifying the role of the PSCC and the accountability and transparency that we have, and the great work that's happened in terms of reducing recidivism in our system of public safety here in Lane County. That's all I have.
Did you want to, this is just a reminder that you mentioned you wanted to make a few remarks about the retreat tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Finally, I would just say that I've had an opportunity to speak with a number of the commissioners, and the agenda for the day will be in the morning. It will just be the 5 commissioners and then a couple of staff. Myself, Diana Jones, I think will be there in the morning. Or actually, I just think it's myself and Judy Williams. Randy Harrington, who you met, is going to facilitate that session. I want to share with the commissioners that Randy's volunteering his time. He has refused payment. Of course, we sought to use a consultant and compensate them for their time. We've worked with Randy in the past. He really said that he wanted to provide this and do this as a resident, and I think he also feels the freedom to sort of be able to work with the board in sort of an open and collaborative fashion that way. And he asked that if the county sees fit, that maybe it could make a donation to Food for Lane County in his name. So I wanted to just share that with you. Also to say that the plan for the day is in the morning for the commissioners to spend some time talking about individual communication styles, social cognitive theory, if you want to look that up, 3 different communication styles. So as you're working with each other, you're understanding where each of you are coming from in your various communication styles. At noon, we'll invite the directors, elected and appointed directors, assistant directors, and some key staff who work regularly with the board. You can think about people like Steve Manila and Jocelyn Warren and Keir Miller and Diana Jones and Alex Kyler and folks like that. Then we'll have a discussion about, Commissioner, where things are working well, things that are coming from staff. What do the commissioners feel like is staff's role? And when issues and initiatives have worked really well, can you give some examples of that? Conversely, would ask staff, where has the board provided really clear, consistent guidance and support on issues, recognize staff for the work that they're doing? Where has that worked really well? What's the role of the board as it relates to the view of the staff? And then we'll talk about strategic priorities and initiatives. Where is the board really looking to head, and how do we try to hone down the focus and clarity around the direction that we're headed and get unanimity and support for some key initiatives? So that's generally what we'll do. You should not expect that we're going to completely revise the entire strategic plan by the end of tomorrow, but expect that by the end of the day, we will seek some greater clarity and understanding around each other's roles, responsibilities, styles, and the focus and clarity of the direction that we're headed going forward. And there will be additional follow-up work after that.
Thank you very much. Any questions from commissioners about the county administrator's announcements? Okay, very good. We will then go for our break until 1:30. Then we'll take up our public works and commissioner business items. At 3 o'clock, we'll be breaking if we wherever we are, to do our executive session at 3 o'clock and come back and finish up the rest of our agenda to then have another recess, and then we'll come back for our retreat tomorrow in Springfield. Okay? Any questions on the schedule? Okay, seeing none, we'll be in recess till 1:30.